Save big on all your back-to-school needs, all in the Baker's app.
Get 3 for $10 on select Kellogg's giant-size cereal. Then get flavorful, fresh Tyson natural boneless chicken breasts, tenders, or thighs for $2.99 a pound, all with your card.
Shop these deals at your local Kroger today, or tap the screen now to download the Baker's app to save big today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Prices and product availability subject to change. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Jersey.
Isn't it about time for somebody's favorite radio program?
Yeah. 97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. I can't see him, but he talks to me.
Now, live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
Josh Henning filling in for Mike Gill on a Tuesday edition of the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN as the Eagles are in New England joint practices. They prepare to play the Patriots on Thursday night, preseason game 2. We'll get into some of the particulars for the Eagles right now in training camp. Plus later this hour, interesting comments from Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson from the Green Light Podcast. We will get to that coming up as well today. Football 4, Adam Kaplan is back for a Tuesday edition here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Plus, the Phillies made some moves today. Frank Close, our Phillies insider from 97.3 ESPN.com, he has the Phillies mailbag, and we'll get into it with him about the latest Phillies news. I'll get into that in just a moment. Plus, we'll go big picture on the NFL. You know, we may have a Brandon Ayuk trade by the time Rob Maaddi joins us at 5 o'clock. So, because the latest news is that there apparently is an agreement in place to potentially send Brandon Ayuk to the Steelers, but they're still waiting on some moving parts. So we will see if those moving parts get set and taken care of by the time 5 o'clock when Rob Maaddi comes around. As always, you guys can join the conversation at 609-403-0973. Your DMs into the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. So I want to start with the Phillies because I actually wasn't planning on starting with the Phillies. I was planning on going Eagles, but then about 20 minutes ago, this Phillies news popped off. And I got to tell you guys, I wasn't 100% expecting this to come out today. I kind of thought there might be a chance things might go this way. But for those who didn't know, the Phillies did have a couple open slots in the starting pitcher schedule. And today's move basically looks like it is a confirmation of who's filling those openings in the schedule moving forward. Taijuan Walker is officially back. Phillies have reinstated Taijuan Walker from his rehab assignment to make room for him on the 26-man roster. Junior Marte was optioned to AAA Lehigh Valley. This move is retroactive to Sunday. So because of that, Taijuan Walker will start tonight for the Phillies. And not that necessarily Taijuan Walker starting is the biggest news in the world. What's the biggest news in the world is the fact that you have a situation where the Phillies, they know that they need to get all the arms they can available because those bullpen games, you could argue, where they put Orion Kerkering and Kobe Allard out there, you could argue that those games might have done more harm to the bullpen than anything else since the All-Star break. I would make the argument that you can look at the overuse of the bullpen in some of the games of recent weeks has led to the bullpen being too tired to do their job when you need them the most. And this is the downside of the whole bullpen game opener concept. And that is, most Major League Baseball rosters are made and constructed with the idea that the starting pitcher is going to give you somewhere between 4 to 6 innings, and then the bullpen comes in and does their job. The Phillies created a situation where now you're asking guys to do jobs they're not used to doing. You're asking pitchers to fulfill roles that they were not previously asked to fulfill. And then what happens? Well, then you saw what happened. Guys like Jeff Hoffman and Orion Kerkering and others, Ruiz, those guys were asked to do way more than necessary. And for me, when I look at the Phillies, I realize that it's a long baseball season, okay? I'm not ignorant to that. I understand that that's part of the conversation that we all have been having. But I'm not ignorant to the reality that you have literally asked a team in the Phillies to do way more than was ever expected of them. You are asking a team to do way more than has been required of them most of the year. Am I supposed to be surprised if guys are not capable of doing the job as you may have hoped? I mean, come on, man. Come on, man. On top of all of this, I know Taijuan Walker is not the most popular man in Philadelphia. Most Philly fans look at him and they either get annoyed or nauseous. But the reality is that for all of Taijuan Walker's exasperating traits, I'll call it, the reality is that he has a job. And that job is to save the bullpen right now. Bringing Taijuan Walker back, you're not bringing him back for any other reason except for you need someone to start eating innings. And it almost doesn't even matter how many runs he gives up. If he can give you a minimum of 5 innings per game, the next 4 starts, you get out of August with 1 less problem on your hands. Because to me, I am convinced that the Phillies bullpen is worn out. And as me and Nick Earnshaw discussed yesterday here on the Sports Bash, Josh Hennig filling in on Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN, we talked about the reality that this Phillies team does not, I repeat, does not have the kind of pitching staff that can sustain tons of injuries and tons of guys being lost. When you started the season, you were like, hey, we have a lot of depth. Well, it's August now. It's no longer April. And that depth looks like it went out the window. So now you need Taijuan Walker on that mound. You need him throwing those 5-6 innings, allowing somewhere between 2 to 5 runs per game, and you holding your breath and hoping today that the day where it's a 5-run. Because you did not improve this team. You upgraded. You didn't add depth. You did an exchange. You went to the store and you said, you went to the customer service counter and you said, here's Gregory Soto and Sir Anthony Dominguez, and I'll take a Carlos Estevez and a Tanner Banks. Forgot his name for a minute there. You went to the customer service. and you said, I want to unload Whit Merrifield and Christian Pache. Give me Austin Hayes. That's what you did. The Phillies believed, rightfully or not, that they could just swap out parts and it would be enough. Well, we have seen so far since the trade deadline has come and gone, Philadelphia can only admit one thing. They're not worse. Because that road trip was rough. You could have and should have won the game on Saturday in Seattle. You could have and should have won the game this past Friday in Arizona. And Sunday's debacle, I mean, what on earth is wrong with some of these guys? They obviously needed a day off yesterday. They obviously needed to take a break from baseball because obviously playing baseball isn't getting them out of this funk. So now you got Taijuan Walker. Taijuan Walker currently is scheduled to pitch tonight against the Marlins and on Sunday against the Nationals. Give him 2 games against mediocre to below average baseball teams. Nothing wrong with that. Eat some innings, Taijuan Walker. Tyler Phillips, time for you to eat some innings too. Because you know what? Every inning that Walker and Phillips eat is one less inning this team has to worry about going to their bullpen. Although I am curious why they decided to send down Junior Marte. I felt like Marte was actually okay. Sure, he had the one horrible game in Arizona, but aside from that, before that game, he was doing fine. For whatever reason, this team seems to really have some faith in Ruiz. I don't know why. But, you know, ever since Marte got recalled to the major leagues, in the games before this weekend, okay, the 6 games that came in before the weekend, he was all right. Not great. And I think that's what's confusing for me. I think the only area I would be concerned about is why is Jose Ruiz still getting all these opportunities? They must really like Ruiz because this guy has done nothing to impress me or make me think, yeah, that's a guy I'm going to win a lot of games with when he comes out of the bullpen. I understand that he's got a string of games right now, this Ruiz, where he has allowed no earned runs in those outings. But there's nothing about the guy that screams, that's the guy I believe in. Especially when you had 2 All-Stars in Jeff Hoffman and Matt Strahm, and since the All-Star break, neither one of them have been the same. So if I can't trust and believe in my 2 All-Stars out of the bullpen, why am I going to believe in a 29-year-old pitcher from Venezuela who has done a lot of average pitching in his career? There's nothing about Jose Ruiz that screams, that guy is reliable. I can believe in that guy. That guy gives me confidence. None whatsoever. Now, does Taijuan Walker coming back fix the Hoffman problem, the Kerkering problem, the Alvarado problem? Probably not directly, but there might be an indirect benefit to having him back, like I said, just to him to pitch more innings. But I'm not convinced yet that that is going to be the answer long term. Taijuan Walker pitches tonight. We'll give you the Phillies lineup when it comes out right here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. As I mentioned earlier, the Eagles are at joint practices with the Patriots, and I think it's very interesting that one guy was on the field today. That's Cooper DeJean. He was activated from the non-football injury list today. And even though he only went through individual workouts, he was not one of the guys not practicing today. That being guys like C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Grant Calcaterra, Oren Burks, and Caden Stearns. It was good to see DeJean back on the field because we're finally now going to be able to start getting some answers about what exactly his role can be for this team. They need to find out if DeJean is going to be a contributor this year or not. Now, him doing individual work is not going to help him get that answer. It's just going to help him get his conditioning up. But I got to think that when you look around this team, they are going to need some answers about who is and who isn't playing certain positions, because Vic Fangio sent a loud and clear message to everyone on Friday night when they started the defensive units. Not the second team, not the third team. They went out there with their week one starting projected unit. It is obvious that Philadelphia has a lot of focus in-house on the defensive side of the ball. So then the question is, what does DeJean do when he comes back? Well, he spoke to the media today, and he said that during rookie minicamp and during OTAs, he was in the nickel and outside corner, which is significant because remember, James Bradbury has been getting a lot of reps at safety, and Vic Fangio touched on that when he spoke to the media this week.
He's doing pretty damn good there. You know, he's got a good feel for football, which has carried over to the safety position for him. I think he understands the game from a high level through his experience and through his intelligence, and it's helped him in the transition to safety. He's been doing a good job.
Definitely an evolved answer from Vic Fangio. What do I mean by that? Fangio is the same guy a few weeks ago who poo-pooed the idea that a guy can move from corner to safety and be successful. Fangio is the guy who came out and said that guys rarely can make the transition from corner to safety. Now all of a sudden, Fangio is saying, yeah, this guy can play safety. And so with Cooper DeJean coming back and him saying, yeah, I don't really have played safety. I've played nickel and corner. Well, you know who else has played nickel and corner? The other person who played nickel and corner in recent weeks is Quinyon Mitchell. And I'm still convinced that if they're going to keep working Bradbury at safety, this organization wants to get these young guys as many reps as possible at corner and at nickel, and they don't want Bradbury standing in the way. I think this organization looks at Mitchell and DeJean as the future of their secondary. And with Sidney Brown uncertain when exactly he's coming back from his season-ending injury last year, I know he's projected to come back, I believe it's October or it's late September, early October. But, if he doesn't come back that soon and he needs more time, does James Bradbury become a guy they just keep playing until Sidney Brown gets back as a backup safety, and then they go to the deadline and they trade Bradbury? Something to keep in mind. On top of all that, on defense, we saw at the joint practice today, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. get an interception. And we talked with Jeff Mosher yesterday here on Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Adam Kaplan will be on today, but Jeff Mosher was on yesterday at Football at 4. And Jeff himself said that he wouldn't be surprised if Jeremiah Trotter Jr. becomes one of the main inside linebackers midway through the year. That is a significant news item because now we are seeing why Jeff Mosher made that prediction. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. gets an interception during the joint practice. A skill that he did not exhibit much in college. In the game on Friday, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. showed you good sideline to sideline movement. Again, a skill set he was not asked to do as much of in college. When you think about what Trotter Jr. can be, it's actually a good thing that he's not his dad. Because his dad had limitations as a linebacker. And if Trotter Jr. can be a more well-rounded linebacker, maybe you're going to ask less of Zach Bond, less of Nakobe Dean, and Devin White. Now, you could have almost a 4-man rotation for inside linebacker and find a way to get productivity out of all of them. Because Jeremiah Trotter Jr.'s greatest skill set is the skill that most people attribute to Zach Bond. And that's blitzing. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. was an excellent pass rusher in college. And I know for some of you out there, you are looking at his sack numbers, and that's all you pay attention to. When you watch him on tape, he was an incredible disruptor on the defensive side of the ball. And it was the threat of his pass rush that got him interceptions in college. It was the fact that teams were so worried about Trotter Jr. coming around the edge and coming to get their quarterback that they would make bad throws. He would drop in the coverage and get interceptions. And what has Jeremiah Trotter Jr. been doing is the reason why he's been getting on the field so much is the reality. He's been following Vic Fangio around. And he's been harassing coaches to get feedback, to get information, to become a better player. He wants to be more. He wants to be better. I think that's a big part of this conversation is the reality that while Zach Bond may have been the name we heard the most from Vic Fangio the last couple months, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. and Nakobe Dean may steal that opportunity from Zach Bond because both of them are getting better. And that is great news for the Philadelphia Eagles because we all know that the only time this team has been to the Super Bowl in the last 20 years is when they have had competent, good linebacker play. Linebacker play, while it has not been a priority for Philadelphia over the last couple of decades, it has been a key for their success when it comes to deep playoff runs. In 2022, TJ Edwards had an amazing season. In 2017, you could argue Nigel Bradham played above and beyond his skill set. Michael Kendricks actually played well too. We kind of forget about him a little bit, but he did play well. And then Jeremiah Trotter Sr. in 2004, he had a very good season. It gets overlooked a little bit because, so much focus was on the offense at that time, right? Back then, there was so much conversation about Terrell Owens joining that offense and Donovan McNabb, the year he was having. And, it was, I think it was, what was it, Lido and Sheldon's second or third year. But it was Trotter's first year back from Philadelphia. Remember, he left to go to Washington, he was brought back. And he had the kind of year that they needed at linebacker for them to be successful. So the key to Philadelphia making a deep playoff run has and always will be, what kind of linebackers are they going to have? And so to me, the three big news items from Eagles practices: one, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. getting that interception at the joint practice. Number two, Cooper DeJean is back and he's going through individual drills. And my third big takeaway, like I said, from the joint practice is how much attention is actually on the defense. We're going to find out how good this defense can be. I mean, I think they're going to be better anyway. But man, this is going to be interesting. Speaking of the defense, coming up next, we'll check in on the text board at 609-403-0973. Your DMs into 973 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle. Lane Johnson on the Green Light podcast had a lot to say about this defensive player and Vic Fangio's defense. I'm Josh Hennig, filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Don't forget, still to come, the Phillies mailbag with Frank Close joining us coming up at 3 o'clock. Adam Kaplan joins us for football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. AP senior NFL writer reporter Rob Motti joins the show at 5 p.m. And it's another edition of Nick's Nuggets tonight with Nick Earnshaw at 4:30 p.m.
It's this.
Save big on all your back-to-school needs, all in the Baker's app.
Get 3 for $10 on select Kellogg's Giant Size cereal. Then get flavorful fresh Tyson Natural Boneless Chicken Breasts, Tenders, or Thighs for $2.99 a pound, all with your card.
Shop these deals at your local Kroger today, or tap the screen now to download the Baker's app to save big today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Prices and product availability subject to change. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Mike Gill.
And I am the voice of the voiceless.
On 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
2:32 here on the Sports Bash. Josh Hennig hanging out with you on 97.3 ESPN, filling in for Mike Gill. We will get to your text in just a moment. 609-403-0973. Plus, when the Phillies lineup comes out, we'll see if they make any adjustments or not, because Taijuan Walker back on the mound. We'll see what that's all about. Like I said earlier, I'm not excited about Taijuan Walker being the starting pitcher, but I'm also aware that him starting means potentially less wear and tear on the bullpen. I'll get to also the Lane Johnson audio from the Green Light Pod in just a minute, but when text messages like this come in, they always make me laugh. And I'm trying to contain myself because I don't know if this individual is trying to, Mike Gill always criticizes me for being literal. So I do try to have a little nuance in my conversation. I think this person is either trying to outdo me in my literalness, or this person just happens to be tuning in to 97.3 ESPN on August 13th, 2024, and they've never listened to 97.3 ESPN before. Anonymous texter chimes in and says, "Are you out of your gourd? The 2000s Eagles were all about defense. Have you ever heard of Jim Johnson? The defense was always the leading story. You must be too young to remember." So, to the anonymous texter, first of all, thank you for at least attempting to join the conversation. I'm not out of my gourd because, again, I will repeat what I said. I said the big story of the 2004 Eagles was not the defense. It was the addition of Terrell Owens. Now, maybe you don't remember that, but I remember that in part because I was not too young. I had graduated high school at that point. So me and all of my circle of friends talked about Terrell Owens. We wanted to play with the Eagles with Terrell Owens and Donovan McNabb on the Madden video game because, yes, you're right. For years, the conversation about the Eagles was about the defense because the offensive wide receivers were such trash. You know, James Thrash, Todd Pinkston, Reggie Brown. They drafted Freddie Mitchell and didn't even use him properly. They depended on Brian Westbrook over too much for years because they didn't have the right type of receivers around the quarterback. The 2004 Eagles, the storyline coming into that year was Terrell Owens. And yes, I heard of Jim Johnson. I know who Jim Johnson is. In fact, that's why it stood out to me so much that when Merrill Reese was on John Clark's podcast a couple of weeks ago, he said that Vic Fangio reminds him of Jim Johnson. So it's very easy for anonymous texters such as yourself to jump on at 609-403-0973 and vent to me when you weren't even listening. But that's okay, because that's the society we live in today. People hear what they want to hear sometimes. The reality is that in 2004, like 2017, like 2022, while our attention for a majority of those seasons was elsewhere, 2022, Jalen Hurts, MVP runner-up season. 2017, Carson Wentz has a phenomenal year, goes down with an injury. Here comes Nick Foles to save the day. 2004, Terrell Owens was the top headline coming into the year. And you could argue that Brian Dawkins had one of the best years of his career in 2004. But all three of those teams had something in common. And it was all linebackers who executed and played at a level higher than we all anticipated coming into the year. It was TJ Edwards in 2022. It was Nigel Bradham in 2017. It was Jeremiah Trotter in 2004. In all three situations, you don't make a championship run to the biggest game of the year without those three players. But thank you, anonymous texter, for attempting to join the conversation. Speaking of defense, so Lane Johnson was on the Green Light podcast with Chris Long, and I love listening to podcasts. Even when they don't talk about the Eagles, I like listening to former players' perspectives because I've always been fascinated about, you know, the men who play the game. They don't always see the game the same way we do, right? And, you know, it's like, for example, guys like Dan Orlovsky and Chris Long and Darius Butler, who joins the Pat McAfee show. They are all guys who are very high on Matthew Stafford, okay? But the average football fan or the average person in sports media has less of an interest in Matthew Stafford's ability than the rest of us do. It's very obvious that there is a divide at times how players view the world and how the rest of us do. And so I love to hear what they have to say. That's why I was glad that my guy Dave Klemic came on the show yesterday when I was filling in for Mike Gill. Dave Klemic, former NFL wide receiver with the Kansas City Chiefs and Mainland Regional High School graduate, by the way. So I like to hear from people at times who are going to give a different perspective. And Lane Johnson first made this comment about practicing against Vic Fangio. You know, the same Vic Fangio that Merrill Reese says reminds him of Jim Johnson. Lane Johnson made this comment about practicing against that defense on the Green Light Pod.
We're so used to, like, basic defenses in our training camp, and every now and then you see a defense like his 2 or 3 times a year, maybe. But now we're getting all the hard stuff and all of our hard calls out of the way. So when it goes back to, playing other teams, it should be a lot simpler.
Two major takeaways from that. Number one, he says that when you're playing against the defense that's throwing that much at you, it's going to make things simpler later in the year. So let's take a refresher look at the Eagles' schedule coming up. Because this is an interesting question. Is the Vic Fangio system going to be the most difficult matchup for the Philadelphia Eagles offense this year? Now again, I know for some of you, like the literal anonymous texter who texted in earlier, this might be difficult for you to understand. But the reality is that it's not always black and white. Sometimes you got to look at the big picture and say, okay, what am I looking at here? Eagles start the year against the Green Bay Packers. Well, the Green Bay Packers had the 10th best points against last year in the NFL. They were also a top 10 pass defense. But they were very weak against the rush. Now, they've tried to improve that this offseason. We'll see if those offseason adjustments line up for them. But I think we can all agree the Packers are a good defense. Monday night, they go against Atlanta. Atlanta is a team that brought in Raheem Morris for the hope that he was going to change the culture of that organization. But it's not like Atlanta has a ton of talent on defense themselves. They are not as good as the Packers. And frankly, you could always ask the question, was Raheem Morris the defensive coordinator for a championship caliber defense in Los Angeles a couple of years ago? Or did he have a Hall of Famer, Aaron Donald, and that was the catalyst for their success? You got New Orleans the week after that. Dennis Allen, another defensive-minded head coach with a defense that might not be as good as the coordinator would like it to be. So after you start the year with a good pass defense with the Packers, you have 2 straight weeks against defensive-minded head coaches who have defenses who may not be that great. Then you got Tampa before the end of the month, before the bye week. I think we all can agree Tampa has presented problems for Philadelphia over the years defensively. But you have to ask the question as well, how much of that was Devin White out there? How much does Kellen Moore change the dynamics of that? Because that was Nick Sirianni and Shane Steichen's offenses that had problems with Tampa. It wasn't Kellen Moore who had problems with Tampa. So we are going to find out really quickly how legitimate what Lane Johnson said is. Because according to Lane Johnson, the Eagles are getting more thrown at them in practice from the Eagles defensive coordinator, Vic Fangio, and it'll make things simpler, he said, during the regular season. Well, in the first 4 weeks, you play one defense that most people would agree has top-tier talent. But the other 3 are a bit of a head-scratcher. All defensive-minded head coaches, right? Raheem Morris, Dennis Allen, Todd Bowles. But they don't have the defensive talent that, for example, the Green Bay Packers have. So, if what Lane Johnson said is correct, in theory, the Eagles should be able to go 3-1 to start the year. Based on his comment there. The other part I took away from is, he said it will make things simpler when we go against other teams. Which goes to make you wonder, was what Lane Johnson and the Eagles seeing in practice last year too easy for them? And then when they got into the game, that is when they faced the real problems that they had. Well, I asked that question because remember, This is what Lane Johnson said a couple weeks ago to Kay Adams. On the Up and Adams show, he was a guest. I feel like Lane Johnson's been on so many shows at this point. I'm losing track of which one's which, but he made this comment about last season.
What we were doing collectively obviously wasn't making a whole lot of sense, and really was a tale of two teams. But even when we did have the record of 10-1, a lot of these games were very tight games and could have gone either way. You can look back at some of those games and feel like you left, 2 scores, 3 scores on the board, and that's kind of how it felt all season.
So was part of the reason why they had those missed opportunities, was part of the reason why they weren't on, doing as well as they were last year, was that because the Philadelphia Eagles were not being prepared properly in practice by a subpar coaching staff of Sean Desai, Matt Patricia, and basically a defensive staff they fired almost everybody from? People forget, the Eagles fired 90% of their coaching staff from last year. There's almost nobody left from last year except for special teams coordinator Michael Killay and assistant head coach and offensive assistant Kevin Tula. Almost everybody else was fired from last year. So now you bring in a new coordinator, a new staff, and Lane is saying, hey man, they're throwing a lot at us, and we feel like the thing is going to be a lot easier for us in the regular season. That is, I think, almost a clear shot at last year, where remember he said, Lane Johnson said, it's almost a month ago now when you think about it. Lane Johnson said almost a month earlier that last season their failings had nothing to do with the players' effort.
I think we had trouble making in-game adjustments. Some blitz packages we had a hard time, especially in that Tampa Bay game. I think when you really go and watch that was kind of the, last two raw for us, but it just seemed ugly. I feel like the effort was never a problem, but we were just very frustrated as to why things weren't rolling our way. So that's the best way I could to describe it, but it felt like the practice, the effort was never the question.
Effort wasn't the question, but poor in-game adjustments. We get a problem with the Tampa game. Well, you don't have that coaching staff anymore preparing you for Tampa. You don't have that coaching staff preparing you for the regular season like in years past. Something to think about as we head in to the 2024 NFL season. I'll get you more audio from Lane Johnson as well as Jordan Mailata on the Greenlight Podcast coming up a little bit later on the Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN FM and a 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City. Josh Hennig hanging out with you on a Tuesday afternoon.
Save big on all your back-to-school needs, all in the Baker's app.
Get 3 for $10 on select Kellogg's Giant Size cereal. Then get flavorful, fresh Tyson natural boneless chicken breasts, tenders, or thighs for $2.99 a pound, all with your card.
Shop these deals at your local Kroger today, or tap the screen now to download the Baker's app to save big today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Prices and product availability subject to change. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
With Mike Gill.
Do I have everybody's attention now?
On 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill in the Sports Bash. Don't forget the Phillies mailbag coming up on the other side of the top of the hour. About 7 minutes now. Frank Close will join us, get more into the Phils. But I just got handed a sheet of paper here in the Ocean Casino Resort Studios because we are going to have tickets to give away tomorrow and Thursday. So you can go to Ocean Casino Resort's Ovation Hall and see Andrew Scholes perform August 24th. The stand-up comedian, actor, television producer, and podcaster is bringing The Life Tour to Ovation Hall. That's Saturday, August 24th. And you can win tickets to go see Andrew Scholes. So tune into the Sports Bash tomorrow and Thursday, and I will have pairs of tickets for you to go see Andrew Scholes in Atlantic City at Ocean Casino Resort. Of course, Scholes is best known for his Netflix comedy specials as well as his appearances with tons of celebrities. And of course, his unapologetic takes and off-the-cuff interactions with the crowd at his shows. So if you don't have a chance to win any tickets to go see Andrew Schulz tomorrow and Thursday here on the Sports Bash, well, all you gotta go is to theoceanac.com for more information about how you can get your tickets to go see Andrew Schulz Saturday, August 24th at Ovation Hall. We will have a couple pairs of tickets tomorrow and Thursday to give away right here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. I am Josh Hennigan. Yes, I am live in the Ocean Casino Resort Studios here on 97.3 ESPN. Coming up on the other side, Taijuan Walker is back. How much does that fix the Phillies' bizarre pitching situation in recent weeks? We'll ask Frank Close that question coming up next on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill on a Tuesday.
This is the Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Now live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on 97.3 ESPN and a 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle. Don't forget 3 o'clock hour of the Sports Bash being brought to you by Broadleys Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning. Broadleys is your trusted source for air conditioning and plumbing services, as well as installation and services for generations. So whether you're someone who's trying to get through the final stretch of the summer season with your air conditioning, or you want to get your heater checked before the weather cools down a couple months, or, maybe all this rain has got your plumbing system a little out of whack. Call 609-390-3907, 609-390-3907, or visit them online at broadleys.net. Frank Close, our Phillies insider, is back for another edition of the Phillies Mailbag here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Frank, long time no see. How you doing, man?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I feel like every time that you are out, Mike Gill sees you and I don't, because I'm back here in the studio.
Yeah, you're stuck in the studio. That's why.
Yeah, I don't get to talk to people very much, so. Frank, I got a bunch of things I want to hit on with you. Before we get to some of the mailbag questions, I do want to ask you, because I said in the last hour, I think Taijuan Walker returning is a blessing in disguise, because to me, this pitching staff has been asked to do a lot of roles that really is not their skill sets, right? You have Kerkering being an opener, Kobe Allard getting all these innings, Hoffman coming in the games earlier. I mean, you could argue that Taijuan Walker is not the best pitcher, but if he can go 5-6 innings, only give up 3 to 4 runs, and you can get those guys back to their normal roles, shouldn't that help this bullpen recalibrate?
Absolutely. I know he's not the popular name, but let's face it, the Phillies are already down Spencer Turnbull, right? Ranger Suarez is also out. That's putting a lot of pressure on this Phillies bullpen. And to me, the big moment that really said this is why you need a Taijuan Walker was in Seattle. Jeff Hoffman comes in the 6th inning, and he's struggling a little bit, ends up giving up 4 runs, as everybody knows. But in a normal circumstance, you go yank Jeff Hoffman once you realize he doesn't have it that day, right? Instead, you have to, if you're Rob Thompson, you're thinking okay, well, I got to get through 4 more innings. We already used Orion Kerkering for an inning to be the quote unquote opener. So that puts them in a really tough situation. And then if you've overextended everybody that day, then what happens the very next day? Well, then everybody was overextended yesterday, and then you have to be careful how you use them again. It's a big trickle-down effect. And if you think back to when the Phillies were rolling all over the place, over all their opponents, it was when they got deep starts out of all the people in the rotation, including Walker, going deep into games. And the bullpen was not overworked. So, you really can't emphasize enough giving Walker the ball and being able to come in and give you 5 innings, for sure. Even if he gives up 4 runs, he also didn't screw up the bullpen for 3 days in a row, right? Because once you get onto that bullpen tangent, so to speak, where everybody is out of whack and out of turn, then you end up saying, all right, well, here you go, Junior Marte, come enter this game and try to protect the lead or keep you in the ball game. And next thing you know, it's all over.
By the way, the Phillies lineup just came out. It's being brought to you by Clark's Moving and Storage of Rio Grande. Moving is a breeze with Clark's Moving and Storage. And I think that this lineup, Frank, has a little bit of a connection to one of your mailbag questions, Frank, because today's lineup, it's Schwarber, Turner, Harper, Bowman. Now that lineup pretty much never changes, except for injury. But then in the 5 spot, it's Bryson Stott, followed by Nick Castellanos, GT Romuto, Brandon Marsh in left field, and then Johan Rojas in center. And the reason why, for those who didn't see Frank's mailbag yet at 973ESPN.com, I bring up that is because Dave mentions on the mailbag, Frank, about Bryson Stott's struggles. Now we'll get to the further part of that question in a minute, but are you surprised to see the struggling Bryson Stott bumped up to the 5 spot in today's lineup?
Here's the problem. They don't really have a lefty to put kind of there. And if you think about it, they've tried Brandon Marsh. He hasn't really claimed it per se. You would really hope that would be Bryson Stott, who can make a lot of contact in the middle of the lineup, to basically be a left-handed Alec Boehm. You kind of saw that promise from Stott in the past. And unfortunately, he's been struggling a lot lately and really not being that for someone. This happened to Alec Boehm too, kind of as a sophomore slump. The guy that you thought would make contact all the time, all of a sudden is swinging out of his boots and his head's in the air and he's missing everything. So I gotta think that he can work this out. But if you think about it though, there's really no other obvious left-handed bat to put there. If it's not Marsh, if it's not Stott, I mean, what are you going to do? Start Cal Stevenson and make him your number 5 hitter? I'm not sure they're going to do that right now, right? No. So, this is one of those situations where they got to hope that he can come through and hopefully matched up against the Marlins. Last I saw, the Marlins still didn't know who they were going to start tonight, but they have a lot of righties on that staff. So this would be a good time for him to maybe try to hit his way out of it. I mean, just think back to the last postseason, right? That grand slam against the Marlins. Maybe memories of that will help ignite him again. But it's really surprising to me. I thought someone who makes that much contact would have an easier go at this. Just like I thought Alec Boehm during his slump was going to make a lot more contact. But in Major League Baseball, they find ways to make changes to their approach to you every single time, right? They saw Bryson Stott a lot last year. They kind of figured out how they're going to pitch him. And then it's up to him to make those adjustments to that new pitching plan. And we're kind of seeing that play out. So hopefully he can work on that. And I think with Kevin Long in the major leagues, that's the way to do it.
By the way, as of right now, it looks like it's going to be an opener tonight, Frank. It's a Valente Balazzo is the guy going for the Marlins. And you're right. He is a right-handed pitcher. So that kind of lines up with what you were saying. If I could ask, really go ahead.
I'm just going to say, and either way, the Marlins are pretty righty heavy, if I remember properly. I mean, they had one of the best lefty relievers in the game, and they traded him. So they're catching the Marlins at a real time of flux.
Yeah, they traded Tanner Scott for half the Padres farm system, basically. It was crazy.
Yeah, and AJ Puck to the Diamondbacks.
Right.
Just faced.
But back to Stott for a minute. I was asking this question yesterday, and I wanted to bring it up to you today because people keep getting frustrated about, why are you platooning Sosa with Stott? Like, why are you sitting Marsh against left-handed pitching? And I don't understand, Frank. Like, is there like a short-term memory of like the 93 Phillies were beloved and that half the team was platoons, right? So Morandini didn't start every day. Jim Eisenreich didn't start every day. But it's like in today's baseball, it's like we have to start Bryson Stott every day.
Yeah, it's a little interesting. I mean, especially when you consider how well Edmundo Sosa did in Trey Turner's absence.
Right.
And everybody was calling for him to start every day. They were saying, throw him in left field and start him every day. Well, so I think it's good that he gets those at-bats. And, Edmundo Sosa has shown some great promise at the plate, but he also gives you a very reliable defense. So, I think it makes sense if you're the Phillies to try to, when you're facing some tough lefties, make sure you give Edmundo Sosa his at-bats there. It's not, even if it's not a straight platoon, you want to see him, when he's going to play, be in a situation like that.
All right, Frank, let's get some of the questions in the mailbag. The other part of that question I mentioned on over 973 ESPN.com was both Dave and Eric asked you about Scott Kingery, which I loved when you opened the answer by saying, for some reason, Scott Kingery is once again a topic. Because I feel like no one has talked about this guy forever. And all of a sudden, in August of 2024, here we are talking about Scott Kingery all of a sudden again.
You know, in some ways it's puzzling, right? Because his major league contract, he signed it before he ever played in the major leagues. 6 years, $24 million. That expired at the end of last year. And what ended up happening was the Phillies still had the years of his minor league contract available because he signed that major league deal. So they got to keep him. And, you know, I thought they would have just cut him and let him try to land somewhere else. But they decided to keep him. You know, spring training, he got to play, show what he could do. Didn't impress him enough to make the team. And, you know, and he's been okay at AAA. I mean, he's been batting .279, a decent OPS. But, you know, I think you saw with Scott Kingery, if they didn't call him up when they called up Cal Stevenson, I don't really see a path for him at this point. Now, Austin Hayes went down with an injury. Now, granted, they gave Cal Stevenson a shot, who is a natural outfielder. He plays center field, which is nice because he's got a decent glove. But, you know, it's just really so hard to envision a scenario that the Phillies would end up calling up Kingery. I mean, the last time it happened, it was after a COVID outbreak and they were out a bunch of players. That was, 3 years ago at this point. They all run together, the COVID years. But, you know, I think that, you know, he's there at AA or AAA, for depth. They would need to have multiple injuries, I think, because the Phillies still have 3 infielders on the 40-man roster that are not, that are able to just come right up, right? That do not require that you have to remove somebody from your roster, right? They still have Rodolfo Castro, who they traded for last year at the trade deadline. He's healthy now at AAA. Cody Clemens, right? He can come up and fill in a pinch in the infield. And beyond that, they also have Buddy Kennedy, who they traded for, you know, the guy from South Jersey, right? So I feel like those 3 would be the options that would come up first. But yeah, I don't know. At the same time, I don't totally understand why the Phillies are hanging on to Kingery. But I also wouldn't be shocked if another team, you know, you can't make trades anymore unless the persons are not on their 40-man roster. Maybe some other team is desperate, so, you know, says, hey, would you trade me Scott Kingery? Maybe something's to be had there. I don't know. But I just don't see a path right now.
Frank Closer, Phillies insider for 97.3 ESPN.com. We're talking about the Phillies and the Phillies mailbag currently at 97.3 ESPN.com. Frank, I also like the question from T because it is a very layered and nuanced question because they said, you know, I know a lot of things are going wrong lately, but what is most concerning to the Phillies right now, what could most likely bite them in October? And Frank, I gotta say, my gut reaction to the question would be, I feel like myself and all of my friends keep having PTSD when I see this offense struggle because the offense striking out in the 2022 World Series and the offense completely disappearing in Game 6, 7 of the NLCS, that's what scares me. That could bite them. Is there something else, though, beyond that big picture, you know, trauma that Philly fans have that you're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, Bryce Harper struggling, I think, has been a big point here, right? You know, you always say that, you know, as Bryce Harper goes, so do the Phillies, right? And if you zoom out to his last 15 games, he was batting just .230, but if you zoom in a little closer, the last 7 games, he's now hitting .321. So there's some signs that he's kind of coming out of it. I think, you know, for Bryce Harper, what really got me was hearing that he was wearing batting gloves than not wearing batting gloves, that he was borrowing Nick Castellanos' bat, you know, to just try to get out of this, which made me think that, okay, it's all in your head, buddy, you know. So I think what you're going to see with Harper as he starts to get going, you got to think he matches up nicely against the Marlins and the Nationals here. So hopefully he can get some things happening during this Phillies homestand. And then you kind of not worry about that. And, you know, I think what happens sometimes when your star player like Bryce Harper isn't hitting, well, then the other players in the lineup try harder. They press harder. Like you talk about Bryson Stott, right? Someone like that might think, oh no, Harper's not hitting. I got to do whatever I need to do to go make up for that. Well, not how it works. You know, I think they're best off when they can all relax because they know the big guns are hitting and then then sometimes the lesser, I won't say lesser players, but the ones further down in the order can respond a little bit better because they're more relaxed. So I think that's something which I think that they can work out soon. You don't think that Bryce Harper all of a sudden just became not talented, right? So you kind of expect him to come back and carry the Phillies team again. But, you know, the other part of this discussion too, what could bite them, you know, you got to feel a lot better about the bullpen in the playoffs. You know, remember, we're looking at the top half of the roster is the one that's impactful here when you go to the playoffs. That's why they were so successful in 22. You know, the second half of the roster had more holes than they have now, but the front half was really good. So when you have Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola and hopefully a healthy Ranger Suarez and Christopher Sanchez as your playoff pitchers, that bullpen's not getting stretched the way we were just talking about, right? So, you know, unfortunately, the Phillies have lost a few games with the extended bullpen. You know, that doesn't happen necessarily in the playoffs. So I think what's going to come down to this is, you know, you saw the Diamondbacks. I know Mike Gill has talked about this a few times. You know, the teams like the Diamondbacks were trying to match up against the Phillies with some of their deadline moves. So I think that's what it's going to come down to, the battle of the AJ Pucks that we just mentioned, you know, that the Diamondbacks acquired, hoping to come in and face the Phillies left-handed hitters. Who wins those matchups? But I mean, in terms of there being one thing that would worry me about the team, you know, I still kind of think Bryce Harper's going to get it going and sustain it. And, you know, Trey Turner, I know has struggled some too, but these are some star players who can just put the team on their backs and run. And meanwhile, at the same time, Alec Bohm is still firing on all cylinders. So, you know, there's not one overarching thing that would really make me worry about this Phillies team right now.
You know, it's interesting you mention about Harper because I've made this comment before, Frank. I have brought it up numerous times because I will never let go of Dave Dombrowski a couple years ago when he said, we are going to out-hit our problems. That this organization built this team with the idea that they have this offensive firepower and that they have the hitters, they have the guys who can overcome a lot of their problems. And listen, at times that has been true, right? You know, when Harper has been hot, other guys have been cold, right? Nick Castellanos is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Schwarber has been absolutely hot in recent weeks. Trey Turner had that stretch of, 6 weeks where he was absolutely unstoppable, it seemed like. So this team is streaky as a general principle, but I just have to wonder, Frank, was this team built with a flawed philosophy?
Well, that's a tough question to answer. I don't know that was built to outslug. I mean, part of the problem was the Phillies' homegrown core from the 2015 rebuild just flamed out. It really wasn't. It didn't yield a lot, unfortunately. Like the McPhail / Klentak rebuild just. Right. You really struggle to figure out what you got out of that, and really, it's been the free agent signings that have kind of led the way offensively here. So. I mean, I think with Dombrowski, I think his strategy was, yeah, of course you have free agent signing Bryce Harper. They were able to at least with some of their prospects get JT Realmuto along the way, but you know, they had to pay big money for these bats. And I think there's expectations that come with that. They really had no choice. I mean, if you look at the lineup, I mean, Alec Bohm is really the homegrown guy that's doing a lot for you. Stott, I still think he's going to come around. You know, he'd be the other one, you know, drafted back-to-back years in the first round by the Phillies. But yeah, I don't know if it's a flawed philosophy other than it's kind of what Dave Dombrowski had to do, because there wasn't enough in the system to really make this team a team. You know, when you think about a lot of other teams that are really good, you know, they're the ones who drafted Bryce Harper. They're the ones who drafted Trey Turner, right? So the Phillies are throwing money at the situation because they absolutely had to. So in a lot of ways, you could say that this is the best he could do with the circumstances he was given. I don't necessarily think he did anything in a flawed way. I think he's still at the same time, even through this trade deadline, he's refusing to give up the talent in the system because he knows that the team is going to need some later. And trying as best as he can to fill the holes. And look, I know a lot of people weren't happy with Austin Hayes being the outfielder they got, but you know, it's a certain point. You just can't keep spending all your prospects for stars or buying all these stars as free agents. You know, you have to make it work. And I think I think Dave Dombrowski's done a really good job of making it work. And the sad thing is, when the Phillies rebuilt the 2016 draft, I mean, A.J. Puck, we've already mentioned him twice, might as well mention him again. Like, he might have been the best first-round pick out of that entire draft, and he's a reliever with a 6 ERA.
Right.
So, some of it was bad luck that the Phillies had no clear star to draft in that system. Mickey Moniak was the best they could come up with, followed by Adam Hazley, right? So really wasn't a lot that they missed out on. But I think there's a combination of that. And really the trades just didn't net them pieces. Like, I guess the Cole Hamels trade via a trade for JT Realmuto with Jorge Alfaro in the middle was the one thing that kind of set them up for later. But basically Dave Dombrowski had very little to work with and just kind of had to make do.
Frank, before I let you go, I got to ask you about, we've had a lot of people the last couple of days, Nick Earnshaw was in with me last Friday and yesterday, and we've had a lot of people jumping on the text board, and they have complained about Rob Thompson. And I want to get your perspective on Thompson, because I have my opinion, right? I have my perspective on the guy, but I don't want to preface or adulterate anything that you might say. So just, what do you say to the people who say that Rob Thompson is not a good manager, or he is the problem?
Well, I read what you write on 973ESPN.com, so I guess I kind of know already. But no, he is not the problem here. The manager has to balance the long-term season with what's in front of him on any given day, right? So the Jeff Hoffman example we just said, does he want to keep Jeff Hoffman in to give up 4 runs? No. But on that given day, he says, well, you know what? I can't risk blowing out this bullpen to screw me up the next 2 days. Right? So you have to hang in there sometimes and try to do it. You got to give your starters a day off sometimes when you probably would prefer to have them in, and because they would give you the best chance to win. You can't do that. I mean, I think the better manager tool would be to see how he presses the buttons in the playoffs, where you're not worried about that, where the days off are built into the schedule, where you have your whole bullpen available every single time, right? But until then, it gets messy. It's like earlier in the season when I guess people were asking me, well, the Phillies going to win 100 games. I was saying no. Why? Because there's going to be these parts of the season where you just kind of have to suck it up and deal with things. You have to deal with injuries now and then. You need to not have your best relievers in the game. And so I think he is good in that he sometimes lets people struggle their way through things. Now, Junior Marte was optioned to AAA today, but some days he has to use Junior Marte. Why? Because it's good for the bigger picture. And now didn't get the results out of it, but he had to do it. So, I think for a manager right now, it's half that, and it's also half managing the locker room, making sure there's good communication, making sure relievers understood their roles. Now, in the case of Gregory Soto, he didn't like his role. But, everybody out there seemed to know what the deal is. They know who especially relief management. That's one of the biggest things that you worry about with the manager. Those relievers kind of know who they match up against on the opposition and when they might come in accordingly. So I think overwhelmingly he's done a really good job and highly respected in and around the game. And I just struggle to think, that he's a bit, quote unquote, bad manager. Usually when people say that, they are almost micromanaging every decision he makes from afar with an overly critical eye, not seeing the bigger picture.
He's Frank Close. Follow him on the Twitter X platform at Frank Close with a K. Check out his Phillies mailbag, the latest at 973ESPN.com. They join the Sports Bash every Tuesday, talk about the Phils here on 97.3 ESPN. Frank, appreciate the time. Good stuff today.
Always good to talk to you, Josh.
And of course, our conversation with Frank Close being brought to you by Clark's Moving and Storage. Moving is a breeze with Clark's Moving and Storage of Rio Grande. And again, the Phillies lineup today is as follows: Schwarber, Turner, Harper, Bohm, Stott back in the 5 slot, Castellanos 6, Realmuto 7, Brandon Marsh in left field batting 8th, and Rojas in center hitting 9th. And, one of the things Mike Gill and I do agree on is we would both probably, instead of having Stott at 5, we would put Castellanos 5 and then Stott 6. That way you're at least putting a hitter who's more of a threat behind Alec Bohm. I think part of the problem for Bohm right now is when Harper is not hitting ahead of him and then the guy behind him is not any threat at all, it creates a huge, like a vacuum in the lineup. It's almost like a black hole that he falls into. And I don't think going left, right all the time has to be the answer. At some point, you just got to do what's best for the lineup. And I think that the Phillies organization does get obsessed at times. They get obsessed with certain patterns and certain lineups and certain guys. And I think that falls into that category. So, all right. We got text to get to on the other side at 609-403-0973. Your DMs into the 973 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle, as well as we're going to post a poll question. Will chimes in from Mays Landing, even though he says he's currently in Stone Harbor, which I think is funny. He says that I sound like this actor and a specific character that he played. I'm going to tell you who that is coming up next. And we're going to turn it into a poll question at 973 ESPN on the Twitter X platform. We're going to put it out there and you guys are going to decide if Will is correct. Do I, Josh Hennig, sound like this famous or infamous, depending on who you ask, movie character? That plus more audio from Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata on the Greenlight Podcast. All that and more still to come. 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City.
You're listening.
Save big on all your back-to-school needs.
All in the Baker's app.
Get 3 for $10 on select Kellogg's Giant Size cereal. Then get flavorful, fresh Tyson Natural Boneless Chicken Breasts, Tenders, or Thighs for $2.99 a pound, all with your card.
Shop these deals at your local Kroger today, or tap the screen now to download the Baker's app to save big today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Prices and product availability subject to change. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
With Mike Gill.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. I can't see him, but he talks to me.
On 97.3 ESPN.
3 o'clock hour of the Sports Bash being brought to you by Broadleys Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning. Broadleys is your trusted source for air conditioning, heating, and plumbing service, installation, and maintenance for generations. Call them at 609-390-3907 or visit them online at broadleys.net. I do plan on getting to some of these more cuts from Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata, but Will chiming in on the text board at 609-403-0973. Will, who lives in Mays Landing but currently is in Stone Harbor, which I can't say it's a bad idea because I think Stone Harbor is a nice, short town. I've spent plenty of days and evenings in Stone Harbor, so if you're going to go from Mays Landing to Stone Harbor, well, good for you, man. That's what I say. But Will has an interesting comment. Now, he goes out of his way in the text to say that he doesn't mean this as a negative. He says, I've been listening to you for years and I'm a fan, but he says, Josh, has anyone told you that you sound like Jonah Hill, specifically his character from Superbad? So what I decided is I am going to turn this into a poll question. So I am making it go live at 973 ESPN on the Twitter X platform. So Will from Mays Landing, who is currently in Stone Harbor, he says, I sound like Jonah Hill's character from Superbad. So the poll question is this a accurate description of how I sound? And I'm leaving it up to all of you guys. So we're going to give it a full 24 plus hours for you to vote at 973 ESPN on the Twitter X platform. Because I genuinely don't know what the right answer is to this. I'm serious. I don't know what the right answer should be for this. Because, first of all, no one's ever told me that before. That's the first thing. Secondly, I know at least one person who will aggressively and emphatically say no to this is my own mother. My mom would say to Will, who lives in Mays Landing but works in Stern Harbor, that she would strongly disagree with you. But my mother has a built-in bias. So we are going to find out from the rest of the audience if Will, who lives in Mays Landing but works in Stern Harbor, if he is correct or not. You can also text in at 609-403-0973 telling me who you think I sound like. Because why not? Will, you have started something, and however this direction goes, it is all your fault, buddy. Stay hydrated, my friend. And I don't mean with alcohol, I mean with water, because you still have another month of summer left. You're working in Stern Harbor. All right? So, at 973 ESPN on the Twitter X platform, the poll question is describing me, Josh Hennig, filling in for Mike Gill on 973 ESPN, sounding like Jonah Hill's character from Superbad, an accurate description of the sound of my voice here on the radio? It's a simple yes or no question and answer. All right. Because if anybody's ever seen the character on Superbad, the character's name is Seth, it's very clear that you are going to have a very strong opinion, yes or no, about this. Because I know it's a bit of an infamous character. Jonah Hill's character in Superbad is definitely a character that I think a lot of people have either a very positive or a very negative reaction to. So, I think that this is going to get some very interesting answers. Again, at 973 ESPN on the Twitter platform, where you can vote on that question. I'll keep it up for about 24 hours, and we'll review the full voting results tomorrow and throughout the next 24 hours on 97.3 ESPN. All right. So, as I was saying before, I wanted to get some more of this Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata audio, because there's somebody on the Eagles defense that may be the key to Philadelphia's success this year. And it's a guy that Chris Long on the Green Light Podcast has been very vocal in his own personal fandom of. Lane Johnson, asked by Chris Long on the Green Light Podcast, tell him about Eagles' second-year D lineman, Jalen Carter.
He's doing pretty damn good.
I told Howie last year during training camp, I said he's going to be the best player this year and definitely next year.
And you see it in camp, like him.
I know, bro. I can tell if a guy can play very quickly.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Like, he's insane.
He's
twitchy.
Well, it's not that he's a smart player. He picks up on stances. Really, he calls it out. Yeah, he knows the calls. So, in addition to, he's 6'3", and just, he's wide, man, strong.
Yeah. He's got that, torso flexibility on those counter
That's
rushes.
A big thing, dude.
Yeah, his flexibility up top, being able to get skinny.
That's a lot of praise for one guy, okay? You heard Lane Johnson say that he told Howie Roseman this guy's going to be the best player on this team, if not this year, next year. You heard Jordan Mailata talk about how much of a freak he is. You heard Bo Allen chime in and talk about how he is able to pass rush from different angles. That's a lot of men. But by the way, for those who haven't seen the video, it's basically Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata on the one side of the table and Chris Long and Bo Allen on the other side of the table. So it's four men all chiming in, praising Jalen Carter. And I can only say I hope everything they said is true. Because Jalen Carter is being asked to do something that is borderline unreasonable. It is borderline unreasonable that they are asking Jalen Carter to basically not just fill the void of no more Fletcher Cox, to not just make up for the production that was missing last year when Javon Hargrave left, but they are putting a lofty target on this guy's back. You are putting him in such a rare air by describing him the way these guys are, that he could be the best player on the team. If Jalen Carter gets close to being the best player on the team, I think most of us would agree that changes how all of us view the Eagles defense. If you are an Eagles fan and you hear that Jalen Carter has the potential to be the best player on the team, you're taking this guy into very rare air territory. There have only been a few men in the last 50 years of the Eagles franchise. And I'm going by 50 years for a reason. If you go through the 50 years of the Eagles franchise, how many defensive players have we ever been able to say that guy is the best player on the team? Reggie White? Brian Dawkins? And I guess Fletcher Cox. That's it. You're talking about an Eagles franchise history that has had a ton of amazing players. But the reality is that we have never described Seth Joyner as the best player on the Eagles. We never described any of the Eagles corners, Lito Shepherd, Sheldon Brown, Troy Vincent, Bobby Taylor as the best player on the Eagles, Jeremiah Trotter. We never described Javon Curse, Malcolm Jenkins. We never described Javon Hargrave for a couple really good years that he had. We never described Hassan Reddick. We never described Darius Slay. There is a laundry list of guys who have played with this franchise over a 50-year period. There was never a point in time where we said those guys were the best player on the team. If Jalen Carter ascends to that level, you are talking about a guy who is being put on another tier of ability, talent, and greatness. This is no small comment by these men. Lane Johnson has been in the NFL for over a decade. Chris Long, between playing and now commentating in the NFL, have been around the NFL for, if you add his dad in, it's even longer than the 15 years. Bo Allen, same thing. Joey Mailata, he's more commenting on Jalen Carter's physical ability, right? He's not really commenting on him, the football player. But if you genuinely believe that Jalen Carter can be the best player on the team, that changes everything about our expectations for the Philadelphia Eagles going into this year. Because there's only a handful of guys in the last 20 years who have been interior defensive linemen who were also the best player on the team. You're talking about Aaron Donald and J.J. Watt type territory. And Fletcher Cox for a while was in that conversation if he was, if not the best, one of the three best interior D linemen in the entire league. So if Jalen Carter is going to end up ascending that level, doesn't that mean, frankly, doesn't that mean that Jalen Carter is going to change the face of this organization? We're not talking about Jalen Hurts anymore. We're talking about Jalen Carter. That is a huge thing to say about one man. BC from Bowers Beach, by the way, brings up Bill Berge. Yeah, I believe Bill Berge was, second in the Defensive Player of the Year voting one year? I had to look it up again exactly how many all pros he had. But still, Berge, Reggie White, Brian Dawkins, Fletcher Cox. 4 men in 50 years. This is no besmirchment on the Eagles franchise, but this is not the Baltimore Ravens, okay? Where 2 of the 3 best players to play in that franchise history are defensive players, Ray Lewis and Terrell Suggs. This is not an organization that has had wall-to-wall Hall of Famers on the defensive side of the ball. You know, just to use an example, like the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, you could literally build an entire defense off of the Hall of Famers who have played in the Dallas Cowboys history. The Eagles have had 4 dudes in 50 years. And again, credit to BC and Bowers Beach for bringing up Bill Berge. So you're talking about over a course of history, 4 men, and Jalen Carter could be the 5th guy to do this and ascend to that category? That is an amazing comment if it becomes true. We'll check back on the text board coming up on the other side. I see text from Terry in Galloway and Glenn from Absecon, 609-403-0973. Your DMs into the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea City.
Save big on all your back-to-school needs, all in the Baker's app.
Get 3 for $10 on select Kellogg's Giant Size cereal. Then get flavorful, fresh Tyson Natural Boneless Chicken Breasts, Tenders, or Thighs for $2.99 a pound, all with your card.
Shop these deals at your local Kroger today, or tap the screen now to download the Baker's app to save big today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Prices and product availability subject to change. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
The Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Right at the 3 o'clock hour here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. I feel like I'm Ron Burgundy right now, where he says in Anchorman, boy, that escalated really quickly. You're getting a lot of comments on this. The poll is literally 100%. Yes, Josh sounds like Jonah Hill. But I have personally gotten people telling me no. One person texted, did leave their name and said, you don't sound like Jonah Hill, you sound like McLovin. Terry from Galloway says, I can hear it a little bit, but I need you to say a few quotes, although it will be difficult to say radio-friendly versions. Glenn from Absecon says, I'm a big fan of Superbad, and you sound nothing like Jonah Hill. Nothing with an exclamation point in all caps. I had a friend of mine text me as well, making fun of the fact that someone thinks I sound like Jonah Hill. Basically, she told me I don't sound like Jonah Hill, but in her mind, she thinks it's funny that someone thinks I sound like. Well, you guys keep voting at 973 ESPN on the Twitter platform, yes or no, of how I sound. I don't think I sound like Jonah Hill, but then again, I don't think I sound like anybody, honestly. So I'm going to leave it up to you folks to, this poll is either going to go well or not so good for Will, who lives in Mays Landing but works in Stone Harbor. I think when this is all said and done, Will and I need to go have a drink and discuss this. I think most of you want to know why Will thinks I sound like Jonah Hill's character in Superbad, more so than me sounding like Jonah Hill from Superbad.
97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill It's time for Football at 4 with Adam Kaplan, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
I give my heart and soul to this franchise, as so many of us do.
Now live, this is Football at 4.
Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill on a Tuesday edition of the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. And yes, it's time for Football at 4 with the one and only NFL insider Adam Kaplan from the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com, at Kaplan NFL on the Twitter X platform. Just search Inside the Birds on YouTube. And don't forget, Inside the Birds exclusive content on Patreon. And he joins us live from the road is Adam Kaplan here on 97.3 ESPN. Adam, welcome in. How you doing this Tuesday?
Josh, I'm good. Yeah, look, I'll be on the road. I'll be visiting tomorrow and Thursday. The Titans are hosting the Seahawks for joint practices. I was with the Steelers Sunday and Monday, and lots going on around the National Football League. We'll see if the Brandon Ayuk trade goes through or not, whether he's staying or going to Pittsburgh. And the Eagles holding just one, the only joint practice this summer, and they're doing it in Foxborough, Massachusetts, which they did earlier today in a practice for over 2 hours.
Yeah, the Eagles were back on the field today, and one of the interesting notes of the day, Adam, Cooper DeJean is back. Now, we will note he didn't go through full practice, but he was limited. He was going through individual drills, so it is good to have the rookie back on the field, Adam.
Yeah, and individual drills is different from 7-on-7 or team. It's individualized movement, and it's just not your normal part of practice. But the great thing is he was taking part in a part of practice. Individual drills are still part of practice. So this is the first step in a long one. So let's not forget, Josh, he's not been on the field with the Eagles for about 2 months. The Eagles ended practice in their off-season program around 13th or 14th of June. So it's basically been 2 months. It's just practice with the team. You're not going to go full bore the first day back with any players come back from an injury like this. So this is good. Look, he got on the field. We don't know where he's going to line up. He did some drills, for nickel and corner and so forth. But we're not going to know. In fact, Josh, their next practice won't be till Saturday, Josh. So we're not going to know for sure exactly what's going to happen. But it's just getting him on the field is huge.
He has said, with DeJean, he had said to the media today, which he has said previously, that he has worked at both corner and nickel. He has not worked at safety. So what do you think his future is going to be for an Eagles team that does still have some questions in that secondary?
Yeah, that's a great question, Josh. So basically, here's the way we look at it. Once he's allowed to practice fully, so then the clock starts on what his role would be. Now, here's the question. Let's just say that, they want to play him an outside corner. Well, that's where Quinyon Mitchell is projected to play this season, eventually. Like right now, he's been their nickel defensive back. And Vic Fangio, the defense coordinator, said, no, he's not a corner. That's a different position. But we know that they drafted him to be an outside corner, not a slot, or as Vic calls a nickel defensive player. It's not, he doesn't see it quite like every other team does, but nevertheless. So they'll have a decision to make because DeJean was drafted to play outside eventually. Although the Eagles knew he could play nickel, he could play safety. We know Moshe and I talked to several teams that thought long term he would have to be a safety, but the Eagles don't see it that way. Not every team's going to agree. So it's fascinating to see what's going to happen here. But for the short term, once he starts fully practicing, which should be next week, barring a setback, because they do their first practice after the game is on Saturday and they practice Sunday. The hope is here by next week, he'll take in full practices. So then we'll know exactly where to line up. So let's extrapolate. If he's lining up an outside corner, maybe the Eagles keep Mitchell as a nickel defender for the time being. Well, how does that impact Avonte Maddox? How does that impact Tyler Hall? Because if Mitchell's going to start the season as a nickel defensive back, you'd only need one backup. You don't need two of them. That impacts Tyler Hall. Now, if DeJean is at nickel, then you could bet week one Mitchell's going to be starting outside corner, and then Isaiah Rodgers would be the backup. There are a lot of differences here. And then Ringo would be their fourth corner, which is really what we all projected. Eventually, he'd be their fourth corner. Rogers would be the third. Mitchell would be starting corner. That gives him tremendous depth. And this is a good problem to have, Josh. You know, with him coming back, once DeGene is allowed to do everything. And by the way, we should mention C.J. Gardner-Johnson's not practicing it. He's not been cleared for contact with that shoulder injury now. But this is a good problem to have. One is, I was saying this on our Discord channel because Jeff and I pop in there every day now. When is the last time you thought of the Eagles having a good mixture of young players and younger and older players and feeling good about the future of the secondary? That to me is a really good problem to have. And it's not a problem, but you know what I mean. Can't play everybody.
Right.
I think it's a great thing.
Well, I mean, it's been, 20 years since they drafted, Lito Shepherd and Sheldon Brown, right, Adam?
Yeah, it is really remarkable to me, Josh, the way this thing has happened. Because, look, they've not been able to draft that well corner, we know, for years. Ringo's had a good offseason. He didn't have a good training camp last year. Isaiah Rogers has done a really good job of coming back. He was healthy. The Eagles didn't know much about him because they couldn't talk to him directly. They could only talk to the agent. They knew he'd been working out, and they thought he was in good physical shape. But once they got him to OTAs, they knew he was back. And remember now, he's on a 1-year deal for the minimum of service that he's played. So it's an old make good contract. If he wants to get paid, he's got to make the roster, which he's obviously going to do. He's got a lot of urgency. So this is a good thing overall.
Talk with Adam Kaplan, NFL Insider from the Inside the Birds podcast at Kaplan NFL on the TwitterX platform. The other injury news we got today, Adam, another player, yes, he was limited, but he was back on the field, a guy the Eagles were hoping could take a hold of this number 3 wide receiver position, Paris Campbell. Talk about him, Adam.
This is an interesting thing. I know that Paris Campbell's got this groin injury, but they have to figure out if he could contribute this season. And they got to see him. They just got to see him be healthy for the rest of camp and that fourth preseason week where there is no game. That's what we call the off week of preseason, where that's when the reporters they don't get to see all of practice. And that's when, as we understand it, the final decisions are made on the roster and rotations and so forth. So it's, to me, Josh, they don't know if Paris Campbell's going to be with them yet. He's got to prove it. The guaranteed money in his contract isn't a lot. They'd love him to be the 3, but they don't know that yet. In fact, it's really Johnny Wilson and Britton Covey who continue to rotate as a 3 in different type of roles. As the 3, there are different ways you can do it, but boy, they'd like to know on Paris Campbell, and at least he started working today, and hopefully next week he's fully practicing.
Adam, is interesting because Paris Campbell does have a history of injuries, and so you would have to think, can they keep him healthy through training camp to get to the season, even make that evaluation, right?
Yes, and Josh, that'll play into whether the Eagles sign a receiver to the 53, like a veteran who hits the street, when teams sign a 53, or do they sign a veteran to the practice squad?
Right.
They're going to need somebody. I mean, this is not a secret. They're going to have to add a receiver or 2 by the start of the season. But as we've told people, it doesn't have to be to the 53. It could be to the practice squad where you then get the guy in your program. There's no pressure to put the guy in the 53. You get him into practice and you see how he does. And if he's needed, then you call him up. You activate him off the practice squad. So that's the beauty of having what we call the 69-man roster, 53 plus 16.
Adam, another player with an injury history who is not practicing again today, was not one of the limiteds. He was not practicing at all today. Grant Calcaterra, a guy who's a phenomenal athlete, but he seems to never stay healthy. This time, that shoulder injury is still lingering and keeping him from getting any action.
Yeah, and we worry about this because it's not just concussion history, which was significant, which he temporarily retired in college about. He's had some injuries, here with the Eagles, and doesn't have the biggest frame in the world. So you worry about that. Let's give him more reps to E.J. Jenkins, who had a nice catch today. They got to get him back. He's the clear number 2 tight end. And, the other thing, Josh, is your number 2 tight end's got to be able to block. And, you really worry. This is the one thing that I worry about with this player is Yeah, as you said, and I agree, he's a really good athlete, and he's had a great camp. But we still don't know if he blocks well enough. And they do have C.J. Uzomah as a better blocker, but he has not had a great camp. And he's got right now, Uzomah is really fighting for a roster spot.
And this is an important conversation, Adam, because we know historically, you look at Kellen Moore's years with the Cowboys, and even last year with the Chargers, he likes to use the tight ends. He is a guy who throws a lot of targets, a lot of volume at his tight ends. Adam, I've said the stat numerous times. Under Kellen Moore, the tight end averages almost 8 touchdowns per year in his offense. So the Eagles need to find out who exactly is going to be available to be the number 2 tight end.
Yeah, and look, Calcaterra's the 2. If the season started now, he's the clear 2. But you got to be able to pen on the guy. Now, this E.J. Jenkins, by the way, is a converted receiver. And he's really big. He's over 6'5". He's a fascinating player, and he's a willing blocker. He's certainly a long shot to make the roster, but we certainly could see him on the practice squad. And it will not surprise us. Let's put it this way, Josh. If they only keep 2 tight ends, they'll probably have 2 on the practice squad. So yeah, they one way or the other are going to probably have 4 tight ends.
Before I let you go, Adam, moving forward, which position do you think is going to end up being a higher priority for the Eagles when they make the final 53, not the initial 53? Is it going to be the backup tight end, or will it be the number 3 receiver?
Boy, in terms of, once the 53 set, looking at other players to add, or just has the biggest question marks? What do you mean by that?
The final 53, not the initial, because we know the initial is, a lot of roster, negotiating and moving the parts. So, like, when we get to the Eagles going down to Brazil to Green Bay, do you think you and Adam, when you do the Inside the Birds pod, are you guys going to be like, man, look what they did with the 3 receiver, or look at what they did with the backup tight end?
Oh, I would say receiver for sure, because they don't know who their 3 is. It's a problem. I mean, you got look. We know that number 3 receiver in this offense won't catch the ball a lot, but this is the most important point. The number 3 receiver is theoretically one injury away from starting. If Smith or Brown gets hurt, that's increasingly important. So, folks, think of it that way. It's not the usage of it. Coaches will tell you, what's our answer if our starter gets hurt? Do you really feel comfortable with Johnny Wilson starting if A.J. Brown gets hurt? I would say probably not. Now, Paris Campbell, if you could depend on the guy, but, man, with 3 weeks of the season starts, Josh, I don't know that you can depend on him.
And as you guys have said numerous times, depth is not the number of guys you have, but the number of guys you can depend on. It's a very different
quality.
Yeah,
it's a quality.
Absolutely. Yeah. At Kaplan NFL on the Twitter X platform. Inside the Birds podcast. Like, subscribe, and download wherever you get your podcasts. Also, check out Inside the Birds on YouTube. And don't forget about the Inside the Birds Patreon. And Adam, you kind of slipped in there a little bit earlier. You and Jeff are jumping on the Discord a little more often.
Yeah, we're on there almost every day. Yeah, we used to do a Discord chat, but it was tough for people to make it. So said, what we'll do? We'll just jump in throughout the day, every so often. Sometimes we'll stay on for an hour, sometimes 10 minutes, but we're there to answer questions and have conversations. And we were there during the game. It was actually, I think I was in there for like 2 hours during the game. It's kind of funny. It's great because you get to hear and see what people, what's on their minds. And by the way, we have our Wednesday live video chat on Zoom for the Patreon members, and it's great because we drop a lot of nuggets we don't drop on our show, and it's you never know what we're going to tell people, so it's always fun, and we like to see the people's faces when we drop some nuggets in there, so it's always interesting.
Adam, safe travels. We'll talk to you again on Friday.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Josh Hennick filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. So let's hit on a couple of the points that Adam brought up there, because I thought there's some very interesting and important information that Adam mentioned to us in that segment. Number one, he mentioned about the importance of the number 3 receiver. And I think that is kind of going to lay a new groundwork for conversation that we're going to have moving forward. I think it is very important that when you are an organization, you have to have priorities. That's why I asked the question to Adam the way I did, because the organization, if you listen to what Adam said, understands that they need to have legitimate backups. Because what if something does happen to A.J. Brown or Devonta Smith? Well, look at the guys they have in camp right now. Paris Campbell finally getting healthy again, but he has a history of being injured. Ainias Smith has had trouble catching the football, right? You have Johnny Wilson. No one is exactly beaming with confidence about that guy out there. And listen, I like Britton Covey in the slot, but I don't know if he's the one I'm looking to fill in when, or if, I don't want to say when, but if Brown or Devonta Smith get injured. And Joseph Ngata has not been a guy who has stood out at all this training camp. So there's a possibility, like a real possibility, that you look at this situation and you say, you know what? We have to go out and get somebody else to help us with this situation. And you look around the NFL, we're already starting to see injuries pop up, right? We're already starting to see other teams deal with injuries. The Eagles are the only team that has questions about their roster, about their team moving forward. And I just have to wonder, does Howie Roseman do what he does? Pull off that trade that nobody sees coming when it comes to backup receiver? Is there someone lingering out there that maybe we're not even talking about? Maybe someone who has a history with Kellen Moore. Maybe someone with a history with Jalen Hurts. Maybe someone who has a history with whoever, right? Who could be an option for them to come in here. And I think the Kellen Moore thing is a little more important than the rest of the guys, just because of the fact that if you're bringing in somebody late to the game, it's got to be someone who understands what Kellen Moore expects from this offense. You know, I would have to do a deeper dive into the Kellen Moore coaching history to see if there is someone specifically out there who you can maybe drop into this team late in the game. But man, you just got to wonder, the way Adam talked about the three receiver, how important it is and how concerning the situation is. You just have to wonder, you know, if Michael Gallup didn't retire, would that been a guy that you would have gone out and say, yeah, go pick him up? You know, is there somebody out there that maybe that we're not thinking of that might be available for a trade, or maybe a veteran cut that the Eagles could say, insert him into the conversation? At least for me, I can't speak for anybody else, but the guy that keeps coming to my mind is Noah Brown. Noah Brown was with the Cowboys the entire time Kellen Moore was there. He spent last year with the Texans. The Texans just acquired Stephon Diggs. So I am curious to know, is there a player or a person or somebody else out there who's not Noah Brown? I'm serious. Noah Brown might be the answer. And I don't know what it would take for the Eagles to go out and pick him up. But man, I'm kind of hoping they go get somebody. And if it takes you trading a draft pick to go get Noah Brown, I'd do it. I would take that seriously. Because, you know, when you look around this Eagles team, if we're concerned about the three receiver, I think it's fair to say the three receiver isn't on the team right now. And maybe the same goes with tight end. You know, if CJ Uzomah is not available, I mean, come on, EJ Jenkins, really? I mean, this organization literally brought in Amari Brown, for goodness sake, hoping that he might be somebody. Like, This is getting weird, man. This is getting a little odd. This is getting a little goofy. It feels like they're trying to make something out of nothing here. And I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of this organization playing things out this way. I think you got to be way more sound, way more in tune, way more on top of things if you're the Philadelphia Eagles. So, just some items to keep in mind as we move forward about the Eagles roster here on 97.3 ESPN. Tomorrow in football at 4 will be Jeff Mosher. And on Thursday, we'll talk with Andrew Checa, who is in New England, Foxborough, for today's joint practice. So Andrew will have some unique and key insights for us ahead of the Eagles preseason game Thursday night. And you hear all the action right here on 97.3 ESPN with the Hall of Famer Merrill Reese and Mike Quick calling all the action on the Eagles radio network as we are your home for the Eagles in South Jersey, 97.3 ESPN. All right, coming up next, it's time for another edition of Nick's Nuggets. Nick Earnshaw joins the show. Coming up next, this is 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle. Josh Hennig hanging out with you on a Tuesday afternoon.
We have the perfect.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Sitting in traffic.
You come with me.
The Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on 97.3 ESPN, 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. We will connect with Nick Earnshaw in just a minute. We're having a little bit of a technical issue. Just give me 1 sec, folks. I'm going to let Nick know that we have to reconnect with him. All right, so gotta love live radio. When you come out of a commercial break, you think the guest is there. We were going to do Nick Nuggets right here, but we gotta wait a minute because we gotta reconnect with Nick Earnshaw here on 97.3 ESPN. I will remind you that this hour of the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN is being brought to you by Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. Get your game on the Gallery Bar booking games at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City, because the football season is right around the corner. Go to the Gallery, go to Ocean, go for the win. For more info, visit oceanac.com. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. And don't forget, speaking of Ocean Casino, tomorrow and Thursday are the only days that you can win. I only have a limited number of tickets to go see Andrew Scholes over at Ovation Hall inside Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. We'll be giving away tickets tomorrow and Thursday are the only days that we have tickets to give away here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. He'll be performing at Ovation Hall on August 24th. That's not this Saturday, but next Saturday is when you can catch Andrew Schultz performing at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. Again, Saturday, August 24th, inside Ovation Hall, where you can see stand-up comedian, actor, television producer, and podcaster Andrew Scholes in Atlantic City. And you can win tickets tomorrow and tomorrow's Wednesday. Thursday is the other day. I'm having a bit of a technical issue getting Nick Earnshaw. I grossly apologize, everybody. Our technology in our studio is not cooperating very well, but Andrew Scholes will be giving away tickets tomorrow and Thursday right here on the Sports Bash. If you don't win the tickets, you don't want to miss Andrew Scholes back in Atlantic City at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. For more tickets, go to oceanac.com to get your tickets today. Now I believe I have Nick Earnshaw for today's Knicks Nuggets here on 97.3 ESPN. Nick, is that you?
I think I'm here, Josh. I think I'm here.
Finally.
What's going on in those studios, man? We got to figure it out, I guess, right?
Listen, man, it's all your fault. See, you're not here today, so I have no help. I'm doing everything by myself. So that's why everything went sideways.
You know, listen, okay, it's okay. I'll take the blame. I'll take the heat. I'm always ready for it, Josh. I'm always ready. And, you know, I guess it's like super bad, right? And apparently you're like Jonah Hill. I mean, things are going super bad in there right now. I don't know. Apparently this is who Josh Henning is today.
So really quick. So what did you think? So Will from Mays Landing, who works in Stone Harbor, he believes I sound like Jonah Hill from Superbad. What does Nick Earnshaw say?
I'm going to say, you know, I never thought of it, okay, until he texted in and you let me know about it. You put the poll out on the Twitter X platform, and I really had to think about it. I tuned into the show for a little bit. I'm like, you know, you sound a little bit like it, but I don't think it's so drastic where it's like you sound just like him. I can hear a little bit in your voice, but it doesn't do it for me. I think he's kind of wrong here, to be honest.
See, I don't think I sound like him either, but I think it's mostly because of the fact that was a very specific caricature that Jonah Hill was playing. Like, I think that if somebody said I maybe sound like Jonah Hill's character from like 21 Jump Street, I think that might be a little bit more doable because that character's voice was a little more, you know, deliberate than Jonah Hill's character in Superbad. So maybe he's just thinking of Jonah Hill in general.
Yeah, Jonah, I can kind of now. I never thought about it before. But I see where he's coming from, but I don't think it's a direct it's the same exact voice. It's just I think he's reaching a little bit. Well, I think you're reaching a little bit here, man. I love you, Josh, but I don't think you sound that much like Jonah Hill. I can see where he might be hearing it a little bit, but I think you might be reaching. I think you're reaching here, Will.
Now, at 973 ESPN on the Twitter X platform, it is a even 50% split between yes and no.
Wow.
Now, I will say
50% of people think you sound like Jonah Hill.
Yeah. Now, here's the interesting part. We still have about 22 hours left on this poll. So we got plenty of time for people to jump in on the Twitter poll at 973 ESPN on Twitter X platform. But as of right here, right now, it's 50-50.
That's crazy. Now, is Jonah Hill been a name that you've been likened to before, like as like a celebrity doppelganger? Like, has there been other names for you, Josh, that you've been kind of compared to? Because I've had a few that I've been told I look like.
So I gotta look him up, actually. There is a specific actor who I've been told numerous times. If you give me a minute, I'll pull up his name because he's one of those people I see his face, but I never remember his name.
Gotcha.
So, just give me a sec here because the movie I'm remembering this guy from is a specific movie. So I just gotta make sure I gotta find the movie real quick.
Okay.
But there was a time where people would say this one specific. I haven't gotten a lot of people over the years. I have to be honest. Like, there's not a lot of people I've gotten over the years, but there is this one specific guy I've gotten the most. I just got to find the movie because I don't remember his name, but he was in the same movie as Zac Efron, I believe.
Okay.
I just got to remember the exact movie because it's a very, once I tell you the guy, you're going to be like, okay, that's interesting.
Right. So you know who I've gotten over the years?
Who's you gotten over the years?
Fascinating. I've gotten David Muir from World News Tonight. That's my apparent doppelganger. I was like, I don't have even that dark a hair.
That doesn't even make sense.
That's what I'm saying.
By the way, I found him
numerous times.
You ready?
Okay.
The guy I've gotten the most over the years is Adam Devine.
Oh, okay. I can see that.
Yeah, because so he was in the movie Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates. It was him and Zac Efron.
Okay.
So
that's a good one. All right, I could see that one. Yeah, I've gotten David Muir a handful of times.
That doesn't even make sense.
That's what I'm saying. I thought it was kind of ridiculous. I was like, really? I don't see it. I just don't.
I don't see it either. Yeah. The main one I've gotten over the years is Adam Devine. He's the main one that I've gotten. I've got a couple other randos over the years, but nothing consistent enough for me to make a point of it. So
you look like Adam Devine, but sound like Jonah Hill. All right. That's Josh Henning for you. All right. That's Josh Henning. All right, Josh. I'll get into these Nuggets here real quick.
Yeah, give them to us here.
We got to talk about the Phillies here. We had a question of the day during the update. I asked people out there, what do you think the Phillies' record will be during this homestand? And for me personally, I think they go 4-2, Josh. I think they go 4-2. I think they split with the Marlins and take 3 of 4 from the Washington Nationals. That's where I'm at with the Phillies. Now, what say you? What do you think the Phillies' record will be during this homestand? Road trip, me and you got completely wrong on Friday because everything went awry over the weekend.
Right.
But I think they bounced back against two bad teams. 4-2 is my prediction. What say you?
So I tend to agree with you for a couple of reasons. One, because the Marlins and Nationals are not good baseball teams. They're just not good teams. And if the Phillies put up half an effort, they should be able to beat these teams. Number two, I genuinely, like I told Frank Close earlier today on the show, Nick, I believe that Taijuan Walker's return is going to help this team. I think that he is going to help reset the guys back to their original pitching roles and that it won't be as complicated, right? It won't not be as messy as it has been with Kobe Allard and Orion Kerkering and Jeff Hoffman all pitching out of their roles. I think even if Walker goes 5 innings a start and gives up 3 runs or 4 runs, I think it saves the bullpen.
Yeah, I'm with you here. And then Rob Thompson also talked about today, Ranger Suarez threw live batting practice today, which is a good sign. He's not going to be back for this particular homestand. He might be available after that when they go back on the road. So that's a good sign as well. Turnbull might be coming back too. There was also a mention of a 6-man rotation again to give some guys rest. Do you think it's time to bring back that 6-man rotation? Because you'll have Walker, you'll have Turnbull, you'll have Ranger, you have Tyler Phillips as well if you want to go that route too. I think a 6-man rotation with where the Phillies are at would be huge in September, especially heading into the postseason. You know, I'm a big fan of the 6-man rotation. I've been calling for it for a lot of the year just to give your Wheelers, your Nolas, days off and a little bit of rest so they're not logging all of these innings and are gassed by the time September and October roll around.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that right now the Phillies got to focus on getting this rotation back on track and getting this team back on track and getting guys back into the roles that they were built for. I think that's the key. Whether that's a 6-man rotation, whether that's a 5-man rotation, do whatever it takes.
Yeah. And, you know, something was telling to me when we had Greg Murphy on yesterday. He said that it was pretty quiet on that plane back. I thought that was really big news out of there. I mean, you know, this is a team that went 4-6 during that stretch on the West Coast. They struggled mightily. They struggled since the All-Star break for the most part. This is a team that needs to get it together. And, you know, if you're giving your top guys extra rest, especially at the top of the rotation, I think that'll be huge. But it falls on the bats. And you and I talked about this yesterday. The top guys have to produce. If they don't produce, it doesn't matter. You can have the best manager in the world. You have the best pitching staff in the world. But if your top guys are getting paid a lot of money, like the Bryce Harpers, like the Trey Turners of the world, JT Realmutos, this team's going to do absolutely nothing. And they're going to go under 500. They'll go 2-4 on this homestand instead of 4-2. So the bats have to come alive. I mean, there's 2 better opponents right now. No 2 better opponents, I should say, than the Nationals and the Miami Marlins. I mean, you got to get it rolling. The Marlins just sold their whole team. I mean, they got Christian Pache playing for them now, Josh.
So what's nugget number 2?
All right, nugget number 2. So today, I don't know if you knew, today's, every day is almost a national holiday for something, Josh. But today is Left-Handers Day. And I wanted to know, so my favorite lefty, I think, growing up, at Philadelphia Philly. Now, you have to be specific. Philadelphia Philly. I'm not going football. I'm not going basketball. I'm only going baseball here. You got to give me your favorite left-hander in Philly's history right now. Mine, it's got to be Chase Utley. Chase Utley's the man. He was born to play here. He was on my list last week when we did our top 10 players that were born to play in Philadelphia. He's a lefty that I absolutely adore, and I think most of the fan base did as well when he was here. Josh, your favorite left-hander in Philly's history?
So now you went left-handed hitter, but he's not a left-handed thrower. So that's not
a thrower. He's a left-handed hitter.
Yeah. So I'm going to try to be a little more true to the holiday here than you are. I think you were cutting a corner there. Pick a Chase Utley because he doesn't throw left-handed.
Not cutting a corner. He's still a lefty. He hits left-handed.
That's a half and half. I don't like it. I don't like it.
He wasn't a switch hitter though. Like Jimmy Rollins was a switch hitter. Shane Victorino was a switch hitter. Chase was full-time.
Ryan Howard was a left-handed hitter and a left-handed thrower.
He was. That's fair. But Dudley still had a lefty in him. He hit lefty, and he was a dominant left-handed hitter.
Yeah, but here's the thing with that. See, a left-handed hitter is a left-handed hitter because their dominant arm on the bat is their right hand.
They're still a left-handed hitter. They're in the left-handed
and their right eye becomes their dominant eye at the plate. So it has to do with what side of the brain you use better.
So you're saying all lefties are fake then? There's no such thing as a lefty then?
Well, no. To me, if you're the National Southpaw Day or whatever day it is has to do with if you throw left-handed. If you write left-handed.
So you're saying Chase Utley's a fraudulent lefty?
Yes.
Wow. People got to text in 609-403-0973. Is Chase Utley a fraudulent left-hander? My goodness, Josh, come on.
So if I'm going to go literally to the answer, okay, my favorite left-hander or southpaw in Phillies history, right? So we're going only Phillies history.
Only Phillies.
All right, because that kind of changes my answer there too. Because I was going to go with somebody who didn't play for the Phillies, but you said specifically Phillies history. You were very specific. So I am going to go Jim Eisenreich. Jim Eisenreich was a left-handed hitter, a left-handed thrower. He had a really long career, for those who don't know. He played for a long time in Major League Baseball, but he was a bona fide lefty bat, lefty thrower. He was a big part of the 93 Phillies success and the 97 Marlins winning the World Series. Your reaction, Nick Earnshaw?
I like it. It's a solid choice. I just can't believe you're calling Chase Utley a fraud. I mean, it's just crazy to me. It's a solid choice. I have no beef with yours. Like you have beef with mine, saying I cut corners here. I don't think I cut corners. Now, you also could have went Bryce Harper. People can go Bryce Harper, but is he a fraudulent lefty too? Because he throws
right-handed.
Yeah. So is he another fraudulent lefty?
He is. He's not a full left-hander.
So you have to be full for you to be considered in this topic.
Like Ken Griffey Jr. Ken Griffey Jr. is a left-handed thrower and a left-handed hitter.
But just like Ryan Howard. I mean, Bobby Abreu, another name that comes to mind. He'd
be a fraud,
but batted lefty.
That's correct.
So they're not full-time lefties then?
Correct. They're part-time.
No, I disagree. I totally disagree with you, Josh. I'm out on you with this one. If they bat left-handed, you're in the left-handed
but their dominant hand, is their right hand.
No. Well, if you're a righty, your dominant hand isn't your left hand.
That is correct.
Now you're confusing me. Now I'm trying to figure all this out, and I'm getting confused.
Nick, let me just stop for a second. Stand in the batter's box, okay?
Yeah.
If you are in the right-handed side of the batter's box, what arm and what eye is in front?
It's the left-handed.
So if you're a left-handed hitter,
left arm.
Right. So that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but all your weight comes from your back leg, and if you're a lefty, that's your back left leg.
Well, that's only one part of the body.
Oh,
I got my right eye and my right arm are in front.
Oh no! So now everyone's just considered right-handed. It's just fake. There's no such thing as left-handed in baseball. There's no such thing, according to Josh Henning. There's no such thing as left-handers in left-handed hitters in baseball, now, especially if you throw right.
Like, for example, someone just texted in Lenny Dykstra. That's a great pull by that texter.
Good. It's a good pull. It's a good pull.
MVP candidate in 93.
Yep, that is a great pull. Now, John Kruk.
Right?
Left-handed hitter.
He is.
But he threw right.
That's correct. So he's a part-time left-hander.
So we can't say Happy Left-Handers Day to those people who are part-time left-handed people.
Well, you can. I mean, it's see now you're kind of like playing that little game with like, you know, how far can you go with this? Because it's like, you know, when you have any of those, you know, days, right? You know, it's like National Parent Day, right? Like Mother's Day or Father's Day. But like somebody have kids, they have like dogs or something. Like, are you wishing them Happy Mother's Day or Happy Father's Day? You know what I mean? It's kind of like that.
I don't think it's like that at all. If you're batting left-handed, you're considered a left-handed hitter. And like Brandon Marsh, he's a left-handed hitter. He can't hit lefties. Can't hit lefties at all. So you can't just say because they throw right-handed they're not a lefty. I'm going to consider them in that boat if they're batting left-handed.
Left-handed means that you're left side dominant. And if you're a left-handed hitter, your left hand is not the dominant hand on the bat.
So if you're right-handed, you're actually lefty then. That's what you're saying.
Well, no, you're probably ambidextrous or you use both sides of your brain to some extent.
Oh, no. See, no.
It's like Ben Simmons. Like Ben Simmons wrote with his right hand but shot with his left hand.
Well, Ben Simmons, that's a bad example because Ben Simmons couldn't shoot lefty anyway. I mean, he's an awful left-hander. He doesn't deserve to be.
Well, here's another one. Tua Tagovailoa. Tua writes right-handed, but he throws lefty.
So is he a fake left-hander? But he throws left. He throws in the NFL with his left hand.
I think he legitimately is a real left-hander because his skill is as a left-handed hitter.
But he writes with his right hand.
So he's ambidextrous. So now are we eliminating ambidextrous people from National Left-Hander Day?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, you possibly could. I mean, I don't know. I mean, what's the definition? I mean, because left-handed, there's more righties than lefties out there, right? I think I'm right on that.
There's more right-handers than left-handers. That's correct.
Yeah. So I mean, that's why it's a big deal to have a left.
I mean, how many left-handed quarterbacks can you even name?
Well, Michael Vick, Tua Tagovailoa, Steve Young, 3.
Good start.
3 off the top, right there.
You've got the Eagles' offensive coordinator.
Oh, Kellen Moore.
That's right.
Wow, I forgot he was a lefty. How about that? Good pull by you, Josh Henning. Good pull by you. Well, I will wish you a happy left-handers day, even though I guess there's no such thing as left-handers. You're either ambidextrous or your right hand. I mean, that's where we'll end it here. A 2-pack of nuggets today. We got everything fixed. Josh Henning, Mr. Everything. I will talk to you, man.
By the way, really quick, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Is there anything funnier than Billy Schwein trying to have a personal conversation in a group chat?
No, there's nothing better because apparently no one else is in that group chat but the person he needs to talk to. Well, we'll leave it there.
I was just wondering if I was the only person who noticed that. So
you're not the only one. You're not the only one.
Don't get us wrong. We love Billy. Billy's great. He's a great guy. But there's a bunch of us. It's me, Nick Earnshaw, Billy Schwein, Dave Clemick. We're all in a group chat together. And Billy starts having an individual conversation with another person in the group chat.
It's funny. I mean, this is a person I had taught how to airdrop. So, I mean, that's where it goes, okay?
Does that mean Billy is more advanced technologically than me because I have an Android?
Yeah, actually, yeah, because you and Mike Gill over there with your green text messages, I'll never understand. I just will never understand it. Got to hold you guys accountable over there.
You followers. All right, Nick, have a good one.
All right, Josh, I'll see you, man.
Nick's Nuggets Day being brought to you by Ocean Casino Resort. It's the Gallery Bar Booking Games in Atlantic City. It's where you want to be this football season. Get your game on at the Gallery Bar Booking Games. Go to the Gallery, go to Ocean, go for the win. For more info, visit oceanac.com. Gambling problem, please call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right. Coming up on the Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN. I'll get back to your text at 609-403-0973 in the next hour. Plus, Rob Motti from the Associated Press will join us here on 97.3 ESPN. Andrew Reserves Point, by the way, says you can't wish someone happy left-hander day to someone who's only left-handed half the time in sports. He says Nick Earnshaw's nuts. Yeah, look, Kruk, Dykstra, Jim Eisenreich, I can go with all those guys. The only reason why I didn't name Steve Carlton is because Nick Earnshaw asked who my favorite lefty is. And I decided to honor, it was my great Aunt Linda. She loved Jim Eisenreich, like basically had a crush on the guy. So I'll never forget that. Rob Motti coming up next.
This is the Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Now live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort studio, here's Mike Gill.
5 o'clock hour of the Sports Bash. Josh Hennick filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. The 5 o'clock hour of the show being brought to you by Kia Acura of Atlantic City. For a great car buying experience, go see Rocco at Kia Acura of Atlantic City on Tilton Road in Egg Harbor Township. Your small but friendly dealer. Check out their inventory online at KiaAcuraAtlanticCity.com. Well, we got more football to talk about before we get back to the text board at 609-403-0973 and your DMs into 973 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle. Because right now joining us as promised, he is the Associated Press senior NFL writer. Rob Motti joins us here on 97.3 ESPN. Rob, welcome back in. How you doing today?
I'm good, man. How are you, Josh?
Doing pretty good. So I'm just going to lay on you the biggest and hardest question to answer off top here. What on earth is going on with Brandon Ayuk? Dude, I am so confused. Like, I don't understand. Is he going to the Steelers? Is he staying in San Francisco? Does he want to stay in San Francisco? Does he want to leave? Like, I feel like Brandon Ayuk is like the person who doesn't know what they want to have for dinner, and they keep staring at the menu and can't make up their darn mind.
I'm trying to see if there was a Brandon Ayuk update in the past 15 minutes since I last checked, because I haven't seen it. It seems like there's always something that pops up, but nothing in the past little bit today. But like, I feel like Josh, he wants to get paid, and he wants the Niners to pay him, and the Niners are reluctant to do it, but he wants to be on a winning team. He doesn't want to be a Patriot. He doesn't necessarily want to go somewhere else that may not have as good of a chance as winning a Super Bowl as the 49ers do. And the Niners know that, and the Niners, I think, are really kind of playing as much hardball as they can, a little bit more so than they did with Deebo Samuel, because this is stretching into week 2 of the preseason. There's so many ways it can go. Like, they can just finally throw their hands up and say, all right, we're going to take the best possible offer right now for Brandon Ayuk and just move on and not deal with this headache, or let it get closer to the start of the season and hope that he gives in. Because are you going to walk away from 14.25? I think that's the amount he's getting this year. Like, you can't walk away from that and continue to hold out at camp if the team's not going to deal it. Like, that doesn't work out well. We saw that happen with Le'Veon Bell when he sat out that season. It just doesn't work out well. You're giving money up that you will never get back. So I think the 49ers are in position to play as tough as they want to. Although I think they need him. If they're going to want to challenge for a Super Bowl and you want to have the best pieces you have out there, I understand he was 35th in targets or 36th in targets last year, and he's not even wide receiver 1 on their own team, and they got numerous other weapons on that offense. Still, he's such a good piece to have for a team that is that close to winning a Super Bowl.
And that's interesting because Brandon Ayuk was a part of that controversial wide receiver class now, right? It was Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs, then CeeDee Lamb, then Jalen Reagor, then Justin Jefferson, followed by Brandon Ayuk was 2020. So I'm sure part of Ayuk and CeeDee Lamb as well as thinking is, hey, we're 2 of the 3 best receivers from a draft class that was grossly miscalculated, and they probably think we want to get paid to a certain level. But it's like you just said, Brandon, I don't think Brandon understands that you are probably the 3rd option or 4th option on your team.
Yeah, exactly right. Like Christian McCaffrey's to do it all purpose offensive player of the year last year. He's going to carry the rock. He's going to get balls out of the backfield. George Kittle, and then of course Debo, who also can run or catch. And they added Ricky Pearsall in the draft as a 1st round pick. So Brandon Ayuk really is no better than a 2nd, but more likely 3rd, 4th option on this team. So his leverage in San Francisco isn't where he feels it should be. And it's interesting as you rattle off those names, Josh, and I'm thinking like, wow, Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, Jalen Reagor. I saw Reagor playing in a preseason game last week still. And I think he ran the wrong route one more time because that's what he can do. Poor Jalen, just isn't figuring stuff out in the NFL. And to think Justin Jefferson all those guys went ahead of him, other than CeeDee Lamb, who's a legitimate number 1 all-pro wide receiver. Wow, a lot of teams missed in that draft. And I don't know what's going to get done first, CeeDee Lamb or Brandon Ayuk. If Brandon's waiting on or hoping that CeeDee Lamb's going to set the table for him, it's not a comparable situation. CeeDee is the man in Dallas, whereas Brandon Ayuk is not in San Francisco. So notable holdouts and hold-ins and everything else that are still dragging into this preseason week 2, and we haven't even touched on the biggest, craziest, nonsensical situation with the New York Jets is Hassan Reddick now asked for another trade. Can you get traded twice in 4 months?
Well, I don't want to get to Reddick. Yeah, I'm saving that for a moment, but let me get to CeeDee Lamb in Dallas. I've seen speculation that his holdout is going to go on until the Cowboys leave Oxnard and they get back to Dallas, and then the deal will get done and he'll show up. And a lot of people I've seen point to Ezekiel Elliott in 2019 where, Jerry was like, who's Zeke? Remember that whole thing? And it was like, that kind of feels like it's the CeeDee Lamb thing all these years later, although Jerry's not as good as delivering that line now as he was a few years ago. He is getting older, by the way. He's not getting any younger. So
it went from who's Zeke to no urgency to sign CD. So right. And then where was he? He was at Nobu. He's like, I was at Nobu a couple of days. What's going on, Jerry? Something's a little.
Jerry's too busy. Jerry's too busy drinking that Johnny Walker to actually pay attention.
You said it, Josh.
But seriously, CeeDee Lamb, I do think he has a very interesting conundrum because CeeDee Lamb has said, Rob, I want to be paid as the highest non-quarterback in the NFL. But so is his teammate, Micah Parsons. The Cowboys can't pay Micah and Dak and CeeDee top of the wrong money. Someone's got to give a little something here, right?
They could be in a position where Dak wants the most of anyone.
Right.
Mike is the highest paid defensive player, and CD is the highest paid non-quarterback on the offensive side. What are you going to fill out your – and I know the salary cap continues to escalate, but you still got to fill out your roster, and then you're going to have to really hit on these rookies and the draft picks, because you're going to have to rely on a lot of those guys. I had a conversation with a radio station yesterday about Dak, and I really feel like the groundwork has been laid for a departure, barring a Super Bowl or a NFC Championship appearance. Like when Dak shows up to training camp, and he's a lame duck quarterback, right? When he shows up and he's talking about, hey, it's a business, and I've seen other guys like Tom Brady finished his career somewhere else. Joe Montana finished his career somewhere else. Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre. You're talking about some of the greatest quarterbacks and the greatest of all time have eventually moved on. And considering Micah's situation, CD's situation, the fact that maybe, if you don't win with Dak, you can make an argument, Jerry Jones and the Cowboys, that, hey, why am I going to give a quarterback $60 million and he hasn't gotten me to an NFC title game? So this is a crucial year for the Cowboys. It's not like Dak won't get paid. Somebody's going to give him that 60. It's just a matter of, is it Dallas or is it someone else in the NFL? He's going to get paid. And I don't think they're going to get there. I just don't think this team is positioned well enough to be able to get to an NFC title game. So I can see the end of the road for a few of these guys, and certainly Mike McCarthy would be first on that list. I'm still shocked that he's even back there this year.
Yeah, Mike McCarthy. It's one of the debates on the national platforms of, who's on the hotter seat. Is it McCarthy, Sirianni, or Dable in the NFC East? It's like the only reason why Quinn isn't on the hot seat because he just got there. He doesn't even know what the seat is. You know what I
mean? Yeah, I'd have to say, like, that is they're neck and neck. And I don't feel Nick should be, because he's had more success. Like, he's actually been to a Super Bowl, right, and almost won it. So I don't think he should be on a seat as hot as McCarthy, but knowing what transpired after the season last year and how they left Sirianni out there to hang for a couple weeks, and there was some overtures to Belichick and some interest in having a conversation. And oh, by the way, Bill yesterday telling Pat McAfee how great of a working relationship he has with the Eagles kind of piqued my interest, which we knew he has, and has that relationship with Howie. Nick's on the hot seat, whether I like it or not, and McCarthy's on the hot seat, deservedly so. So. And I think the Eagles are going to come out of the NFC East for sure.
Talking with Rob Maaddi from the Associated Press, joining us here on the Sports Bash. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. Speaking of the Eagles, you did speak to Jason Kelce in a long-form conversation, and I thought, based on what I saw in your article, Rob, one of the interesting things that he brought up, Kelce basically said the same thing that Lane Johnson said, the same thing that Brandon Graham said, which is, last year, the problem was the coordinators just didn't work out. And they've all said it a little differently, obviously. They all say it their own way. But so if the coordinators were the problem last year, then why do people still keep hating on the head coach?
It's a great point. And I think part of, like, what Jason said, that, and to me, Jason was one of the, like, we think of Jason, this tough, macho, burly, grizzly, right? But he's one of the smartest football players we've seen in Philadelphia. And he was the glue on that offensive line. And he helped all of these quarterbacks that he's played with over the years, just with how smart he is and his ability to recognize defenses. So when he offers an explanation, it means a whole lot. And he lived it. He lived through it. But when he says, like, hey, there's one of two ways to go, and it's either you get simple on offense and defense and go to your bread and butter and go to what works for you and go back to basics, or you try and get complex and out scheme and come up with these designs to outsmart these other teams. Well, they didn't on offense, and you saw how predictable they were, and things got just completely blown up towards the end of the season there. And then on defense, they went completely opposite, where they did overhaul the system. They did change their defensive coordinator. So in my mind, I'm thinking, should they have gone complex, and did they have the men in position, Sirianni and Brian Johnson, in place to be able to outsmart the other teams? They went simple, right? And that's what Frank Reich and Doug Peterson did with Nick Foles in 2017, and then they won the Super Bowl. So we know simple can work, but simple didn't work last year. And was simple the alternative because Sirianni and Johnson weren't smart enough, for lack of a better term right now, to be able to out-scheme and outsmart other teams? Or was simple the alternative because they genuinely felt like, hey, this is all we need right now. We got the talent. We got the pieces. We just need to simplify things, do the 5 or 6 things that we do so well, and beat other teams. Because you want your coach and your coaching staff, if need be, to outsmart the other coach and the other defensive coordinator and the other offense.
Right.
Like, you want them to be able to do that. So I don't know if that was an indictment. And I should have followed up with Jason, and I probably will, just not in the context of that conversation that we had. If him saying go simple or go outsmart, and we said, like, were you saying that our guys, the guys we had there, weren't they're not there yet. They're not that level of elite coaching that they can outsmart anyone. That said, to answer your question as I went all around in circles, Josh, why is the pressure still on Sirianni when everyone's blaming the coordinators? Because that's Philly, and that's what everyone does. They always hold the coach most accountable. They didn't even want Sirianni after his first news conference, and we can go back.
They didn't want Doug either.
Yeah, they didn't want Doug. They didn't want Charlie Manuel.
Exactly. Thank you.
Right. So it seems like everyone they don't want from the start has the most success. So maybe Nick is hoisting the Vince Lombardi trophy with tears streaming down his face in New Orleans this February.
Oh, that would be a great AP photo right there. Just him with the trophy in his hand, like, cradling it like a baby, and him just like tearing, crying, tears coming down his face. That's an iconic photo right there, Rob.
I just hope he doesn't react like he did after the Chiefs win, just doing some of that nonsense. Like, act like you've been here before, man. Come on, Nick. Like, I like Nick, but some of that stuff's like, eh.
Yeah. By the way, to your point about Jason talking about the simple versus creative, I want to play it for you. Jason did say this a couple months ago on his podcast. I think it was like right after Kellen Moore got hired, Rob. So let me just pull it up here. So this is what Jason said about what he thinks Kellen Moore is going to bring to the Eagles offense. And you just talked to Jason. So you tell me, when you hear him say this, how much you think this lines up what he told you. Take a listen.
He's done a little bit of everything. Obviously he comes from Boise, and it's it was
wacky back then, man. It was
damn
hard
sure
to want to
was.
say wacky. It was a different offense though, and they did
a lot of stuff. I mean, it was creative. That's what it comes down to. And I think there was a lot of people, even looking back ourselves, that realized that we could have potentially been a little bit more creative, I guess, offensively. And I think Kellen will bring a lot of that.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that comment from Jason a couple months ago, but lacking in creativity, I think is kind of answers my question. The alternative was, let's go simple, because we weren't creative enough. We couldn't, we weren't ready to step in there. And maybe that is because, like, look, a lot of the game planning, a lot of the scheming, like a lot of that is the coordinator. So that doesn't necessarily have to be an indictment of Sirianni. It could be more so on Brian Johnson, because you gotta, in the middle of the season, if you're going to get a little bit more creative and complex and out scheme and outsmart, you need that coordinator to be ready to do that. So I'm not going to take that as a shot at Nick. I'm just going to take it as, hey, the cohesion wasn't there with the coordinators last year. They got 2 guys in there who I think are equipped to be able to handle whatever comes their way better this year. I'm excited to see Kellen Moore's creativity, his motion, his pre-snap sets and what they do, and Jalen under center more and how he's going to run from this. So I want to see how that plays out. And I think they're positioned nicely with the talent that they have to come out of the NFC East, but that's not good enough. You got to come out of the whole NFC.
Yeah, and because I am Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ES, because I am an on-air host and a producer, now I'm going to lead you on to the next side of the conversation, Rob, which is because you mentioned about also in Jason Kelsey's quote was about Patricia and Desai. This is what Lane Johnson said on the Green Light podcast with Chris Long about new DC Vic Fangio.
We're so used to basic defenses during training camp, and every now and then you would see a defense like his 2 or 3 times a year maybe. Yeah. But now we're getting all the hard stuff and all of our hard calls kind of out of the way. So when it goes back to, playing other teams, it should be a lot simpler.
There's that word simpler again, Rob.
So they got really complex last year defensively. And now you got, Fangio's like a whole other level of defense than what they were used to last year. But he's saying, from an offensive line standpoint, like facing that kind of defense in practice day in and day out, it's going to put them in a better position when they see them. He only said, what did he say? 3 times a year, 3 or 4 times a year?
He said you typically only see a defense like that 3 times a year. He says, whereas now we're seeing it every day in training camp. And he said it will make what we do in the regular season, who we go against, simpler, which is interesting, Rob, because 3 of the first 4 teams they see this year are all defensive-minded head coaches from the NFC South. So it's interesting that Lane's already saying that he expects, I don't want to say it's going to be easy, but he used the word simpler.
Yeah. When he's saying simpler, and then Jason was talking about simple last year and complex. Like, are they on the same page? Well, Jason's not playing anymore. So
right, Jason's not playing anymore.
You don't have to worry about being on the same page, but that's understandable too, Josh, because think of it this way: you got 5 different offensive linemen, you got 11 players, numerous guys on offense, right, who are going to rotate in and out. But generally, offensive line are the guys that are going to play every snap as long as they're healthy enough to go out there. What comes easy to Jason may not come as easy to Jordan or Cam or Lane, and what is complex to one may not be to the other. So I'm not going to go too deeply into Lane's simple and Jason's simple but complex and all that. Hey, man, you got to go out there and execute. And Jason did mention that too in the conversation. We also didn't execute, right? We didn't play the way we performed this season earlier, and he said himself included. And that was obvious. Jalen Hurts took a step backward, and Jason, although he was all pro and he was at a high level again, he also wasn't at that same elite level as a year earlier. And I think that was across the board with the team. So they got to get back to that 2022. I think they can get closer to that. You may never see that kind of level of clicking on all cylinders, but I think they can get closer to that.
All right. So I told you I would push the Hassan Reddick question down the line here, because what I want to understand from you, because I don't think the audience is as concerned about Hassan Reddick holding out as in a literal sense. I think people are more trying to figure out, Rob, why this is happening, because I think the perception that people have of Hassan Reddick is that he doesn't come off as a guy who is a selfish individual. He doesn't come off as somebody who's a bad guy, right? So people are trying to decipher right now, how do they match up the guy that they saw play in Philadelphia the last 2 years, the guy who played in Carolina, the guy who played in Arizona, with the guy who's holding out now?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I didn't know this until I saw my colleague who covers the Jets, Dennis Waszak, writing about it and pointing out how when the trade first went down, Hassan did speak to the New York media about his situation and saying how excited he is to be there and how all of that will work itself out and Joe and my agent will take care of it. And he went from that to no showing to everything to demanding a trade now. So I don't know why it escalated to this point, other than it's complete incompetence on the New York Jets front office to not foresee this, to not foreshadow. Hassan Reddick got traded by the Eagles, not because he's a poor football player. He's a premier elite pass rusher, edge rusher, a game changer. a guy who put the Eagles in the Super Bowl by knocking Brock Purdy out of the NFC Championship game 2 years ago. He's that level of important, and they traded him because they didn't want to pay him, but you had to know he's going to want to get paid. And if you're the Jets in a win-now mode with Aaron Rodgers, what the heck are you doing? Like, why would you trade any assets for Hassan Reddick and just drag your feet? Get him in camp, get him happy, get him paid. And this has kind of been Hassan Reddick's entire career, right? Since he was drafted he went from Arizona to Carolina, underappreciated, underpaid, undervalued, and all he does is just rack up sacks wherever he goes. Comes to the Eagles, looks like he's found himself a nice home in his hometown area, and things like this happen. But I could not think more poorly of the Jets front office, and specifically Joe Douglas, for the way this has transfolded, because I think it's an absolute debacle the way that this has gone down, and they should have known better.
It's a debacle, Rob, but selfishly, I'm actually glad it's happening. Not because I'm anti-Rodgers. Do you know how many arguments I got into from like 2017 to 2020 about Joe Douglas is a football guy. He's the mastermind behind the Eagles winning the Super Bowl. He's the guy who got Howie, the players. Like, we had all these people here in Eagles country who were so anti-Howie, they couldn't admit that Howie built that team and got them a championship. And I selfishly am glad that Joe Douglas is struggling now with the Jets, because it really does go to show that Howie actually did know what he was doing, and that maybe Joe Douglas isn't like the secret puppet master behind the scenes.
Oh man, that's a great take, Josh, because it's true. Like, look at the success Howie continues to have, bringing in guys, assembling a top of the line roster, winning divisions, getting to the playoffs, and going to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, while Joe Douglas is off floundering with the Jets. Had to make a deal for Aaron Rodgers. That blew up because he got hurt. Didn't have anyone in position to come in and play and take his spot. And they sucked last year offensively for it, because they had a defense good enough to win. And that should have been on Joe Douglas' shoulders, because even if Rodgers wasn't comfortable with a big name quarterback playing behind him, so what? You should have made that move. It was for one season, one season only. So you're right. Howie should get more. Howie should look even better now that Joe Douglas comes out looking absolutely terrible.
He's Rob Maaddi, senior NFL writer and reporter for the Associated Press, at Rob Maaddi on the Twitter X platform. Check out all of his coverage and his full interview with Jason Kelce over at the Associated Press at AP. So, Rob, before I let you go, I got to ask you, how happy are you the Phillies have no more night games? Late night games.
Oh man. Oh, I don't mind them, because I'm up late, but it's like it drags into midnight, and you're trying to. They couldn't win any of them, and it was just a horrible road trip. I hate seeing Arizona. I just don't want to play that team in the playoffs. I was hoping they don't make it back to the playoffs. Now they're going to come out of the West. They'll definitely be a wild card team. And I know that the Phillies haven't lost much ground in the past 2 months, even though they're under 500 to the Braves. They've lost a lot of ground to the Mets, who went from like 16.5 to where they're at now, 7.5, 8, whatever it is. But their hold on the number one seed is no longer a stranglehold, and that stinks, because you want everybody to have to come through CBP. So it's a big time frustration, Josh. We got to turn it around and make it a red October.
Figured I'd throw in one more Phillies question before I let you go, Rob. I know I'm a
sure.
So, Rob, appreciate you jumping on, my friend. We'll talk soon.
You got it, brother. Appreciate you.
Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. We'll check back on the text board. Coming up next, 609-403-0973. Your DMs into the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Seattle. And we have one more audio cut to get to from the aforementioned Green Lake podcast with Chris Long. We mentioned Kellen Moore. What did Jordan Mailata say about Kellen Moore? You may be surprised at how Kellen Moore will shall I say, lessen the negative impact of Jason Kelce's departure on the Philadelphia Eagles offense this season. I'm Josh Hennig. This is the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
You're listening.
Save big on all your back-to-school needs, all in the Baker's app.
Get 3 for $10 on select Kellogg's Giant Size cereal. Then get flavorful, fresh Tyson Natural Boneless Chicken Breasts, Tenders, or Thighs for $2.99 a pound, all with your card.
Shop these deals at your local Kroger today, or tap the screen now to download the Baker's app to save big today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Prices and product availability subject to change. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
With Mike Gill.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. I can't see him, but he talks to me.
On 97.3 ESPN.
5 o'clock hour of the Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN. Being brought to you by Key Acura of Atlantic City. For a great car buying experience, go see Rocco and the team at Key Acura of Atlantic City on Tilton Road in Egg Harbor Township. Your small but friendly dealer. Check out their full inventory online at KeyAcuraofAtlanticCity.com. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Couple things I want to get to before I get back to text board at 609-403-0973. First of all, the poll is still open at 973 ESPN on the Twitter X platform. The question being, earlier in the show, Will from Mays Landing, who works in Sun Harbor, said that he's been listening to me for years here on 97.3 ESPN. He said that I sound like Jonah Hill's character from Superbad. So, now to me, I don't sound like that at all, but we put it out there to the people at 973 ESPN on the Twitter X platform. So far, it is a 50-50 vote, yes versus no. Straight down the middle. Now, my favorite, though, is you have under the tweet where one person says, that is a hell no for me. Now, apparently not enough people agree with that guy because it's a 50-50 split on the vote. You still have about 20 hours to vote in the poll. Also, don't forget tomorrow, thanks to Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City, we will be giving away tickets tomorrow and Thursday for your chance to go see Andrew Schultz August 27th at Ovation Hall in Atlantic City. The stand-up comedian, actor, television producer, and podcaster Andrew Schultz is bringing The Life Tour to Ovation Hall Saturday, August 24th. You can win tickets. Be tuned tomorrow and Thursday for your chance to win right here on 97.3 ESPN. But you must tune in to the Sports Bash the next 2 days for your chance to win. And if you don't win tickets, just go to OceanAC.com to get your tickets to go see Andrew Schultz now at Ocean Casino Resorts Ovation Hall in Atlantic City. All right. Now that we cleaned some things up, on the text board, George from Summers Point chimes in at 609-403-0973. Says, Josh, listen to your conversation with Rob Maaddi earlier this hour. It seems like people are blaming Sirianni for last year's collapse because he did not take the reins from the coordinators who were obviously either overmatched or whatever went wrong. It caused the ship to sink. I think that George from Summers Point goes on to say, I think that if he did, people would have been more positive opinion about him now rather than the appearance he did nothing. Couple of things there, George Summers Point. Number one, I think Sirianni did, though, take an active role because Sirianni has taken the blame for demoting Sean Desai and giving Matt Patricia the control of the defense, the play calling duties. So I don't think people blame Sirianni because he didn't take charge last year. I think people blame Sirianni, George Summers Point, because I think in people's mind, they believe that Sirianni, if he's such a great coach, if he's such a good leader, if he's so good at the culture and et cetera, that he should have been able to re-steer this team back on track and not let it go off the rails. I think people want to blame. Rob Maaddi brought it perfectly earlier. Rob said that People hated Doug. People hated Charlie before Peterson won a Super Bowl and Manuel won a World Series. I think a lot of people tend to not like the coach who doesn't line up with their own personal sensibilities. You know, everybody stinks till they win a championship. Every quarterback is a bum until he wins a championship. You know, it's such a weak way of going through life that everyone is stupid, everyone is dumb, and everybody is fill in the blank unless they agree with me or they do what I want them to do. You know, and no matter how much Nick Sirianni panders, no matter how much he plays to the Philly crowd and goes around and says stuff like, you know, hey, I saw the signs out front saying we should run the ball. I think we're going to do that this week. And what did they do that week? They ran the football. And people forget about that stuff. People forget that Nick Sirianni, he has really done everything in his power to appease himself to the fan base while also being true to himself. I think George Summer's point, the problem is that no matter what Sirianni does, until he wins that championship, until he wins that Super Bowl trophy, until he gets that ring, people are not going to respect him. And I think that it's just the nature of the beast. I think it's part of the sports fandom. And it's not all sports fans. Look, it's not you, George and Summers Point. It's not, I'm trying to think here, Jeff in Ocean City, right? It's not Andrew in Summers Point, okay? It's not every sports fan who thinks this way about the coach. But the reality is that you can't escape it. It's part of the conversation. You know, I don't think every Eagle fan hates Sirianni, but I do think, as we see in the non-sports world, some of the loudest people are not always the people who speak for the majority of fans out there. And so when I do a radio show here on 97.3 ESPN, or Mike Gill is back here doing the Sports Bash next week, or Billy Schweim in the locker room on Saturday, or Nick Earnshaw when he sits in with me, whoever's on these microphones on our station, we try to remember that we are not speaking to just the loud minority who hates on fill in the blank person. We got to speak to everybody. And we have all been guilty of spending too much time addressing one person, one perspective, because it might be the loudest perspective or the loudest person. And I think that is kind of where we're at, George Summers Point. I think the idea being that we try to be balanced in our conversation. We also try to address everyone and everything we possibly can to the best of our ability. So help us God, I do. I just got to understand and promise to tell the truth, the whole truth. But the point is that you're right, George Summers Point. People want somebody to blame. And sometimes people just can't accept that maybe last year's Eagles team was just not as good as we thought it was. Maybe last year's Eagles team was just not great. And maybe the coordinator was just that bad. And Sirianni, because he is not Bill Walsh, right? Because he's not one of the greatest coaches of all time, then maybe he needs better coordinators around him. Andy Reid, and if I'm counting this correctly, he's had 1, 2, 3, 4. He's had 5 different defensive coordinators in his coaching career, but he's only gotten to a Super Bowl with 2. Jim Johnson, Steve Spagnuolo. He never got to the Super Bowl with the other 3. Bill Belichick only won championships with 2 offensive coordinators in his entire coaching history. But yet he had, if I'm doing the math correctly in my head, 1, 2, he had 4. So only half the offensive coordinators that he won a championship with. Bill Parcells never reached a Super Bowl without Bill Belichick as his defensive coordinator. I think that we sometimes forget the importance of the coordinator when it comes to these conversations. It's like a quarterback with wide receivers. you can't name me a great quarterback who didn't also have really good wide receivers. We forget that Joe Montana had Jerry Rice and John Taylor, okay? We forget that Tom Brady, he won a couple of Super Bowls without Randy Moss and Gronk. But those Patriot teams where the defense was the dominant force on those teams. Peyton Manning, he never won a championship without Marvin Harrison or Reggie Wayne or Demaryius Thomas or Julius Thomas catching the ball from him. So I think that if we got to start treating the quarterback and the head coach a little differently. We got to start treating them like they're only good because they meet our criteria, when the reality is that the people around them are important. And that's why I find it interesting what Jordan Mailata said about Kellen Moore and about how Moore is going to cover up for Jason Kelce's absence.
Kellen's done a good job of simplifying and having answers for blitzes and having hots, simplifying the pass game and like protection calling. Yeah. And Kelce was our problem solver. Now that we don't have him, Kellen's come along and just again having hot reads, having answers to blitz zero, and then simplifying the calls up front based on the hot looks.
They didn't do that last year. Why? Because Kelce was the problem solver. And it might be a blessing in disguise that Kellen Moore is coming in here as a guy who never worked with Jason Kelce before. So he doesn't know what the role was like with Jason Kelce. So now he could enter next year not having that hanging over his head. He doesn't have to worry about that moving forward. He can proceed with a plan of, hey, we don't need Jason Kelce to be our fixer anymore because we got guys who can do a job, that job being taking charge of the offense by the coordinator, not depending on the center, not depending on the quarterback, not depending on variables that can go sideways. No, the coordinator is saying, I'm in charge now. I'm the captain now. Right? So I think that's part of the conversation as well. When the Eagles hired Sirianni, they basically assigned him a defensive coordinator, Jonathan Gannon. Similar to how the Eagles, when they hired Doug Peterson, assigned him Jim Johnson. Just like when the Eagles hired Andy Reid, they assigned him Jim Johnson. This organization has, 30 years of history under Jeffrey Lurie of when I hire a head coach and we have success, it's because I tell you that you need strong coordinators. You can't do it by yourself. But then people want to blame the head coach for everything. And I always wonder, do the people who blame the head coach for everything, do they do that with everything in life? If you're in charge of a business and something goes wrong, do we say we should fire the owner of the business because something might have gone wrong one day out of 365? I'm just wondering how the blame game works, or do we only do it for sports? All right, coming up the other side, we'll wrap up the hour here on the Sports Bash. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City.
Save on O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner. Get 2 cans of O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner for just $8. Valid in-store only at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts. The Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Well, we got some interesting Phillies news dropping. Not like breaking news, but kind of like something to keep an eye on. So, according to Rob Thompson, Ranger Suarez threw batting practice this afternoon, and they're hoping that he will be back next week. So the idea being that if we pull up the Phillies schedule here, right? So Taijuan Walker's pitching tonight. And that means Tyler Phillips is holding down Rangers' slot in the rotation. So if we're hoping Ranger is back next week, he may end up pitching that Friday in Kansas City. Because right now, that is the main day that is open. Because right now, it's Walker, Phillips, Wheeler, Nola, Sanchez. Then again, it's Walker, Phillips, Wheeler, Nola. It should be Sanchez. But do they give Sanchez an extra day off by bumping Sanchez down and then bumping everybody off one in order to get Ranger back in? So instead of going to a 6-man rotation, you create a extra rest day on top of a rest day for all these guys. Something to think about. Ranger Suarez could be back Friday, August 23rd. Very, very interesting. Again, late next week, Tyler Phillips does schedule to start next Tuesday. I don't see that day be taken from him. Thank you to everybody for listening to 97.3 ESPN. I'm Josh Henning, filling in for Mike Gill. Have a great night, everybody.
Save big on all your back-to-school needs, all in the Baker's app.
Get 3 for $10 on select Kellogg's Giant Size cereal. Then get flavorful, fresh Tyson natural boneless chicken breasts, tenders, or thighs for $2.99 a pound, all with your card.
Shop these deals at your local Kroger today, or tap the screen now to download the Baker's app to save big today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Prices and product availability subject to change. Restrictions apply. See site for details.